Josie was denied bail. National Prosecuting Authority's provincial spokesperson is Mojalifa Snukwatsani.
The charges against the accused in the Machakas Hadebes matter have been withdrawn by the Bloemfontein Magistrate Court after the court found out that there was insufficient evidence to continue with the prosecution of the accused. Investigations that are led by the police are continuing this matter.
In some election-related news now, the Labour Party says all it wants is an opportunity to contest next month's elections. On Monday, the Electoral Court dismissed the party's application to review the decision of the IEC not to reopen the portal for submissions. The party has now approached the ConCourt to seek to set aside the electoral timetable and postpone the elections. Joseph Matunjwa, the party's interim executive member and president of the trade union AMCU, says they fulfilled the necessary requirements. He, however, says they did not meet the deadline because of alleged glitches with the Commission's online portal.
We paid their deposit and then we uploaded many of those signatures from different provinces and even national. The issue here was those signatures of the list of the people that we put on the list, and they just want the original. That's the only thing. But if the ConCourt can say we give a Labour Party 6 hours to conclude what was left, we are ready for them.
The KwaZulu-Natal Judge President Thoba Poyodlwati has urged all political parties and independent candidates that will contest next month's polls to honour the Electoral Code of Conduct. Poyodlwati delivered a message of support at the ICC in Durban at a ceremony that the IEC organised for those participating in the elections to sign a provincial pledge.
The Electoral Code must be subscribed to by every registered party before that party is allowed to contest an election, by every candidate before that candidate may be placed on a list of candidates in terms of Section 31. A code is binding from the date on which the notice calling an election is published to the date on which the result of the election is declared. The sanctions can vary from a formal warning, a fine not exceeding 200,000, the forfeiture of any deposit paid by that person or party in terms of Section 27(2)(e).
In other news now, the Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi says the COVID-19 pandemic had initially scuppered his department's de-employment program. He has denied allegations that it is an election ploy. The aim of the program is to alleviate poverty through training unemployed people and assisting distressed companies. It is envisaged that the 23.8 billion rand initiative will assist to create job opportunities. Nxesi was speaking in Cape Town during the launch of the Western Cape Labour Activation Program.
We're to refocus on dealing with the calamity, the more than 5 million workers, and they're giving them that 65 billion rand. At that time, we were talking about the total shutdown. Nobody could do the training at that time. However, we said, let's plan properly now, re-evaluate everything, and launch it together with the budget cycle. The budget cycle, unfortunately, starts in April. That it coincides on the eve of the elections. Well, that's a coincidence.
And finally, a vote in the UN Security Council on granting Palestine full membership of the United Nations is expected before the end of the week, but it is likely to fail due to the US opposition. A Security Council Admissions Committee was unable to reach consensus on the Palestinian Authority's application. This signaled that a draft resolution recommending to the General Assembly that the State of Palestine be admitted to membership of the UN was unlikely to be adopted. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports.
The Council is due to hold a ministerial meeting on the Middle East Thursday when the issue of Gaza and Iran's recent aerial retaliatory strikes against Israel will be further ventilated. The vote on Palestinian membership is expected to happen within the next 48 hours at the latest. Council resolutions need 9 votes in favour and no vetoes from any permanent members. The measure expects to easily overcome the 9-vote threshold, which could then draw Washington's veto to block the recommendation to the GA. The US believes the establishment of a Palestinian state should come through direct negotiations with Israel. Palestine currently only enjoys non-member observer status without any voting rights. Sherman Bryceby's SABC News, New York.
Recapping your top story, former public protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhobane's matter will be heard in the High Court in Pretoria today. She's seeking the court's urgent intervention in the Office of the Public Protector's decision not to pay her the 10 million rand gratuity due to her impeachment. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 6:30.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM Sports headlines, cricket action saw the Proteas women's captain Laura Wolfart setting a new SA ODI record with an impressive 184 not out. And in soccer action last night, Sekhukhune United and Stellenbosch FC battled to a 1-1 draw. More details coming up just before 6:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. We started off with a urgent alert if you're in the Soweto area. Try and avoid the Noordgesuk area, sort of Canada, New Canada, Noordgesuk, bottom of the New Canada Road around the Soweto Highway, Mookie Street, Klipspruit Valley around the circle. Community unrest and protesting in that part of Soweto. It might be a good idea just to stay away from there. There are already some road closures and traffic backlog in the area. Also, collision blocking 2 lanes, N3 north at Modderfontein Road. It's an early start to heavy backlogs north of Galulis as you line up through the Edenvale area and towards that particular scene. Durban, some roadworks overrunning from overnight, still on the M4, the Southern Freeway, Congella, 3 lanes just slipping into 1, so that's going to be a problem. The longer that stays there, the heavier the traffic into Durban will get. And Cape Town, a very misty morning, probably mistier and foggier than it was yesterday. It's widespread. It's from the Cape Town City Bowl area throughout the suburban area, out through Hohook Pass and Bottrafia, over Sir Lowry's, really widespread, very thick, very heavy. Drive carefully, lights on please once the sun comes up. Looking at queuing pressure on the N2 inbound through that mist from Khayelitsha towards the airport runway, and Baden-Powell is sitting with a bit of traffic queuing pressure between Strandfontein and Coastal Park. I'm Rob Byrne. SAFM Sunrise starts now.
SAFM Sunrise, a vivid start to your day.
8 minutes after 6. Good morning. Welcome to SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. How are you doing this Thursday morning? I was looking yesterday, and I've been keeping a little bit of a tally on the days of no load shedding. You know, I have a little notebook, by the way. It's a brand new, fresh notebook today, which is very exciting. Can we all just take a moment and enjoy Stephen's new notebook? Thank you. I really appreciate it. Anyway, so Eskom putting out a statement yesterday just to clarify something. And it's one of those funny things that, you know, sometimes we have a discussion about. How many days of no load shedding have we had? Well, that's what they were clarifying. It's 22 days of no load shedding. Eskom also saying it's the longest period of no load shedding since June 2022. And it was in June 2022, of course, that we were still in the pandemic and industrial demand was, subdued and all of those things. I don't know yet if we are at a point of saying that, we can see definitively and definitely that things will get better from here. It's too soon to say that. And obviously, no one is saying there'll never be load shedding again. I'm sure they will. But still, 22 days of no load shedding during a peak time. And the other thing I must just say is that it is going to get colder from here as well. And that obviously is going to have an impact. So we need to be very aware of that too. And that's one of the things that we need to look at, that it is going to get colder. But still, we're in an interesting space with load shedding at the moment. And I see, in fact, that in the city of Joburg yesterday, in Fordsburg, they turned on a new refurbished gas turbine. I have absolutely no idea why there would be a gas turbine generating station in Fordsburg, but there we are. 50 megawatts is coming from there. Anyway, I was just interested. I wonder how old it is as well, if it's been refurbished. And I wonder if it makes a lot of noise for the residents of Fordsburg. It's a very, very densely populated area, so it's an interesting place to sort of generate electricity. Anyway, let's hope that it all sort of works. But just sort of taking an eye, looking at what's happening with load shedding at the moment. It's very interesting. In Khayelitsha yesterday, 8 people were shot dead in 3 separate locations, and yet everyone in the community says that this is all linked. And the claim has been that this group of people, presuming primarily men, have been involved in terrorizing the community. And all of the reporting very sort of carefully, from reporters who've actually been there, suggesting that in fact this is some kind of revenge for that, or whether the community acted or how it happened, I don't know. But still very sort of interesting, and it reminds me of what happened in Marion Hill when the police police killed 9 people who had 4 guns between them, and community members there saying this group of people had sort of terrorized them for a very long time. And it comes back to violent crime and how do we respond to it. And if you don't respond to it, communities do their own thing, and that's what happens. And we spoke yesterday to a person talking about how the police in Hanover Park had just not been able to deal with the problems there. And it turned out that she herself had just had someone in her family hijacked yesterday morning. Quite a strange sort of situation, you know. But still, I worry a lot about the sort of anger that we're seeing around crime at the moment. The Gauteng Education MEC, Matoma Chilwane, yesterday, talking a bit more about, and it's taking a little while, I think, for us to get a sort of definitive view to actually know for sure what happened on this camp where 2 learners died. And, you know, at first I thought that this was an organized swimming thing. Then it seemed that one ran into this river and another person followed them. Now, it seems that what happened was that the children, there were no teachers involved at all, and that some sort of NGO had basically decided to take these children on a camp, and that there was one social worker with them. And I mean, please, can it not be? There were 90 children on this camp that he had 1 adult for this. I mean, this is just chaos. Did one person just decide to take children away? Did people let them? I mean, how did that happen? And I know at some point we need to ask about the role of parents in this as well. But there are also allegations that this was a sort of discipline camp. I don't know what that means. I thought at first that it was a sort of leadership camp, but a discipline camp. So, I mean, I don't know if taking away children who are battling at school, who are causing disruptions at school, taking them away, I don't know if that's the right idea, really. Maybe. But it seems that there are allegations that they had been abused or beaten on the camp as well. And that came from the MEC yesterday. He'd been speaking to the family of one of the boys who died. So there's a lot going on here, and I think it's going to take a little while before we know, and there'll be an investigation. But very scary in many ways about what's actually happened. Julius Malema was on the campaign trail in Eldorado Park yesterday. He spoke about crime. He said that it is wrong for people to pigeonhole the coloured community when it comes to issues of crime and drugs. He also said that he would be willing, and this was in Business Day, this one, he said he would be willing to work with Mkhonto weSizwe and former President Jacob Zuma after the elections. He said there's sort of been discussions between them already, and you know his relationship with Zuma has been complicated over the years. I mean, in a way, it was Zuma who was responsible for removing Malema from the ANC in the first place, and of course both of them out of the ANC now. So in a way, I suppose it makes sense for them to work together. And we're all talking without kind of knowing what the results of any of the election will be and what that would mean. But also, of course, the EFF and MK working together, no one sees them together as getting more than sort of, 25, 30%, I suppose. But let's see. I mean, we need to wait for the elections. Malema also saying, and I think I've got this quote right. He says that it's the corruption of the ANC and white people that have made our economy stagnate. I thought that was an interesting comment, the way that he put it. John Steenhuisen, also campaigning yesterday, leader of the Democratic Alliance, he said that President Cyril Ramaphosa had used public resources by promising jobs to people over the weekend, and that the Nasser Ispani jobs campaign in Gauteng, he used the word, was a scam. I thought that was a strong comment, and I know that jobs campaign has been sharply criticized by many people. It's been very interesting to see how that plays out. Unisa are now, this is the University of South Africa, the Correspondence University, they're now investigating 1,400 cases of academic dishonesty. I don't know, Stanza, when you and I were at school and studying academic dishonesty, there was a shorter word for it. How did you spell it? L-I-E. Oh, yes, you lied. Or you cheated. There we go. Let's use that. Academic dishonesty. You cheated. I mean, that's the claim. In each case, obviously, they'll have to go and make a finding. And then also, they're investigating allegations against a chief financial officer, and we know the Higher Education Department wants to take it into administration. The minister, based on the evidence, I think the minister must be right so far. And then the university also asking the media to report fairly. And look, when the minister wants to take you into administration, and your chief financial officer is being investigated for alleged wrongdoing, and you've got 1,400 cases of academic dishonesty, cheating. Well, I'm sorry, it's not us. It's not us as the media. You feel free to respond if you like, but it's not us as the media. And then Ster Kinnick, the cinema chain, they say they're closing 9 cinemas. And I think we're sort of at the end of cinema in a way. And I used to love going to cinema as a kid. I tell you what is fun to do, though. I'm not going to sort of advertise anything. But if you take children to an open-air cinema event, that's quite fun. If you can do that. Kids love that. And whatever it is, maybe it's watching us win another World Cup or something. We go and do that. that's quite a lot of fun. And then see their friends and do this, like going to a concert in a way, if you pick the right sort of event. But I kind of feel that, big screen TVs. And then the other thing, and I must just say this, the sheer cost of going to the cinema just got too much, and was just too expensive. And the experience of it just didn't really merit it, whether you went with your kids or just your partner or maybe a new partner, whatever it was, Anyway, good to have you along this morning. 086 000 2032, SMS 41391. Tweet us FM Radio, and at Stephen Grootes, and send your WhatsApp voice notes. 0614 104 107. Good morning, 16 minutes after 6.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
Leander Mahome, my friend, it's been a long
Steven,
time.
What a long time it has been, right?
Feels
like I've been away for 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, I was going to say 2 elections, but yes.
Well, something like that. But hey, I'm happy to be back here.
Good.
Albeit. Very, very short time.
Just
between you and me.
All
just
right.
between you and me, Stephen. Anyway, Stephen, the IEC now has added more voting stations for missions abroad. You would know that the DA actually took the commission to court to compel them to open honorary missions abroad as voting districts. So, let's find out what happens.
So they're implementing that. We still don't have reasons from the Electoral Court over former President Zuma, do we?
Absolutely not. And it's one of those, it's baffling that we actually going ahead full speed into this timetable without actually finding out the reasons behind the Electoral Court actually ruling the way it did. So hopefully they would come up with those reasons sooner or later, because it just creates some unwanted chaos now, does it?
Yes, and it's difficult to sort of, talk about it without knowing what the reasons are.
Absolutely, Stephen. We're looking forward to that. Still on everything election, Stephen, independent candidate Anele Mda will be unveiling her manifesto. Now, this is a first of its kind for an independent, as this is usually done by political parties. The former ANC Youth League and COPE member is hoping to make it to Parliament and will finally find out what her policy orientation is that will get her on the ticket to those seats in Parliament. So
wasn't she with COPE as well?
She was with COPE at some stage. Yes. Yeah, she was. And former public protector, Stephen, this one we carried in our news bulletins, Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane will be facing off once again with her successor, Advocate Koleka Gcaleka, in an urgent court application in the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. She's challenging the decision by Gcaleka to refuse to pay her the gratuity. Now, the question is whether or not she is entitled to that, considering the fact that she was impeached just a few days before her term ended. So let's find out how the court rules on this one.
The current public protector said that she had wasted a huge amount of money in frivolous litigation and left the public protector's office in dire financial straits.
Absolutely. So let's find out what the court will see as this happens. Now, Stephen, this is a peculiar story for me. The City of Tshwane Mayor, Councillor Celia Brink, will deliver his second State of the Capital address during a special council sitting at the Tshwane House Council Chamber. He will be reflecting on the work done over the past year and highlight the city's plans and projects for the year ahead. This one I didn't see this one coming, eh? Anyway, and finally, Stephen, the Civil Aviation Authority will be hosting a 2-day National Aviation Conference. The issue of safety and fuel security will be dominating the discussions. You'd recall that AXA recently had to come out to quell fears after reports of an imminent shortage of jet fuel started circulating around. So let's find out what that conference actually comes up with. Do we have a problem with jet fuel shortage or not?
It's all about the management of it and refineries shutting down and
Stephen.
all of that sort of thing.
That's what we have on our diary today, Stephen.
Leander Mahome, thank you very much. Nice to have you along with us. 19 minutes after 6.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Your weather around the country this morning: Tshwane partly cloudy, 11 and 24. Johannesburg fine in the morning, partly cloudy later, 8 and 20. Vereeniging fine in the morning, becoming partly cloudy, 8 and 23. Bombela partly cloudy, 14 and 24. Polokwane partly cloudy, 12 and 24. Mahakeng fine in the morning, becoming partly cloudy, 12 and 26. Vryburg fine in the morning, becoming partly cloudy, 12 and 26. Mangaung fine in the morning, becoming partly cloudy, 10 and 25. Kimberley fine in the morning, partly cloudy later, 12 and 26. Uppington fine, 17 and 33. Cape Town cloudy in the morning and evening with fog, otherwise partly cloudy, a light to moderate southerly wind, 14 and 22. George cloudy in the morning and evening with fog, otherwise partly cloudy, a light and variable wind, 15 and 26. Gqeberha cloudy with fog in the morning and evening, otherwise partly cloudy, a moderate to fresh southwesterly wind, 15 and 22. East London fine, partly cloudy in the afternoon, a light northwesterly wind, 19 and 26. Near to Queenie fine, a a moderate easterly wind, 18 and 28. Richards Bay fine, a moderate easterly wind, 18 and 30. And Pietermaritzburg fine, 14 and 29.
I am Dion de Vos, the Executive Mayor of Sarah Baartman District Municipality, and I hereby invite you to comment on the draft Integrated Development Plan and Budget for 2024-2025. The draft IDP and budget are available at municipal offices in the 7 local municipalities of the district and on the municipality's website, sarahbartman.co.za. Comments should be sent via email to idp@sbdm.co.za. Comments close on 22nd April 2024.
The Royal Club says victory on home soil is non-negotiable, but Ghanaian outfit Dreams FC can smell maximum points as a dream come true. The capital of Egypt faces the capital of Ghana. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup semi-final. Catch Zamalek Sporting Club up against Dreams FC live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 this Sunday, 21 April at 6 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international news.
22 minutes after 6, good morning. In Europe, the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, is now reporting that its analysis shows that 50,000 Russian soldiers have been killed while fighting in Ukraine. It also says that more soldiers died in the second year of the conflict than died in the first year. Russia's refused to comment on the reports. It does not say publicly what its death toll in Ukraine is. In February, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers had been killed during fighting there. Obviously, that number will have gone up since then. Dennis Ariva is a researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Dennis, good morning.
Good morning.
We're seeing now how many lives this conflict is taking. In total, at least 80,000 soldiers. This must be the highest number of soldiers killed on a sort of formal battlefield in a formal war like this for many, many years.
Well, in terms of casualties for the military, certainly it's up there over the past couple of years. Certainly for Europe, this is unprecedented. But it's obviously. But we also need to remember that this is the minimum number. The actual number of casualties is probably much greater.
Does it appear, from what we know, that Russia is losing more soldiers than Ukraine?
It does, and that confirms other reports that were published before the BBC numbers, that Russia tends to suffer greater losses. It's a combination of tactics, perhaps corruption on the line. But there are certain factors that play into this. That it does confirm some of the earlier reports that were published about the casualties and the comparison between Ukraine and Russia in terms of casualties.
Is it also about the nature of the battle? So I would imagine, I'm no expert, but I would imagine that it is more dangerous to attack than to defend. If you defend, you're often surrounded by something. Think of a sort of a trench, for example. You might be in a trench. If you're attacking, you have to climb out of your trench and go and attack the person in the other trench. So is it also about the nature of the conflict? Russia attacked Ukraine, and as a result of that, Russia is losing more soldiers?
Well, you're absolutely correct. Except, if you remember, last year it was Ukraine attacking and Russia defending. So we would probably expect different numbers and higher casualties for Ukraine. And yet, still, we've seen sort of the balance tipped towards Russia. But certainly now that Russia has gained the momentum and gained the initiative, I believe the first time since the spring of 2022. Russia will try to use this initiative to develop it into advantages on the battlefield, which requires Russian soldiers to attack, which will lead to even greater casualties, certainly.
I hate to say this, but this becomes, in a way, a battle of who has more soldiers, more complicated than that, and I'll come to that in a moment. But if that is what it is, it's just about who has more soldiers, then Russia wins the fight, obviously. Is there a point at which even Russia cannot keep supplying new soldiers?
It's a very touchy subject for Russia, because on the one hand, as you rightfully pointed out, Russia has a greater population, At the same time, it's a matter of prestige for Russia, for President Putin. He cannot admit that Russia is losing more soldiers. So that's a serious issue. It's also a problem, the problem of public perception of this war in Russia. You don't want to sort of alert Russian people to the challenges on the front lines and the battlefield, and Russia has been very careful in terms of how they frame this war and their sort of losses on this war. One of the reasons why, for instance, they haven't updated the number of casualties since I believe 2022. So it's certainly it's a public perception issue that Russia would try to avoid, and so high level of casualties would certainly result in a pushback, as we've seen during the mobilization last year when Russian people were drafted to the military, and the early reports of casualties has resulted in tremendous pushback from people because average people were dying on the front lines.
This is a strange question, but how important is the number of soldiers dying in all of this for the two sides? What I'm trying to get to is, yes, the number of soldiers dying is a factor, but I presume it's not the only factor. Obviously, there are economic factors. There's the drone attacks. There's the attacks on power stations and other infrastructure. What I'm trying to get to is how important is the number of soldiers dying, or how important is the rate at which soldiers can be supplied to this conflict? Because obviously there are other factors involved too.
Well, this is a complicated question, but to narrow it down, I think for Ukraine, the number of soldiers dying is extremely important. Ukraine is already struggling to fill in the spots, to get more people in on the front lines. So that is a major challenge for Ukraine. It's a less of a challenge for Russia because of all the other things that are in place in Russia. However, of course, if you are running out of soldiers on the front lines and you cannot get people to join willingly to join your military, and you cannot rely, then you have to push people into the military. You have to mobilize them, which creates socioeconomic problems inside. So it's less of an issue for Russia, but it is an issue, and it certainly is an issue for Ukraine.
Dennis Reaver, thank you very much indeed at the Institute for Security Studies, 28 after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
Laura Wolfhard, everyone talking about her again.
Yes, she's just absolutely blazing, smashing it. What a match yesterday. She set a new SAODI record with an unbeaten 184 against Sri Lanka. It was a monumental effort, becoming the highest score by a South African. Sri Lanka's Chamari Atapattu replied. She hit 195 not out. This incredible innings led Sri Lanka to a 6-wicket victory and tied the series. In a match with many twists, Sri Lanka held their nerve, chasing down the Proteas, imposing total of 301 with 33 balls to spare. More cricket action saw Keegan Peterson. He led the Rocks to a 7-wicket win over the Tuskers in their Cricket South Africa T20 Challenge match at Boland Park. The Rocks, who won the toss and elected to field first, restricted the Tuskers to 119 for 9. They needed 120 runs to win, and they chased down that total in 17.4 overs, scoring 121 for 3 with 14 deliveries to spare. Soccer action now with little to separate Sekhukhune United and Stellenbosch FC in the DStv Premiership. Babina Noko and the Cape Winelet side shared the spoils in a tense 1-1 draw at the Peter Mokaba Stadium in the Premiership last night. Another match saw SuperSport United. They were also held to a 1-1 draw by Polokwane City during their Premiership clash at Lucas Moripa Stadium in Attridgeville. Now with this result, SuperSport have gone 8 league matches without a win since December when they beat Orlando Pirates 3-1, and they are faced with a mountain to climb in the top 3. Here's their coach, Gavin Hunt.
It's not going for you, so, so it wasn't going, it's not going for us at the moment. But I thought we deserved, especially at the end, we had 2 great chances. Their goal, we're clearing the ball, hit somebody, go straight to the other guy in the box. So disappointing, we had to really work hard for our goal. But I think we deserve more than the draw, even with 10 men, so it's disappointing.
Action elsewhere saw Real Madrid beating the holders Manchester City 4-3 on penalties to reach the Champions League semi-finals after the last 8 tie ended 4-4 on aggregate, while a header from Joshua Kimmich saw Bayern Munich. They had a 1-0 win in their Champions League quarter-final second leg, claiming a 3-2 victory, and that's knocking Arsenal out of the competition. That's a wrap for now. More sport on Sunrise, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You with SFM. In the next half an hour, we'll talk a little bit more about the impact of heroin and inyalpe. Sort of the same thing is what researchers are telling us. Leading the conversation, 6:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, the University of South Africa has confirmed that it has identified several incidents of dishonesty among postgraduate students. There have been cases of alleged cheating, with some students blaming technical glitches on the online invigilator application. Former Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane's matter will be heard in the High Court in Pretoria today. She's seeking the court's urgent intervention in the Office of the Public Protector's decision not to pay her the 10 million rand gratuity due to her impeachment. And the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court in the Free State has withdrawn all charges against the man accused of the murder of 16-year-old Machaka Khatebe. 27-year-old Ntantla Josie appeared in court yesterday, and it found that there was insufficient evidence against him. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Protester-related delays this morning. Community unrest top of Soweto. It's around the Klipsdrift Valley Soweto Highway Circle, Nooitgesuk area. Expect some delays. Various routes are being closed. There's heavy traffic on the Klipsdrift Valley Road and on Soweto Highway into that area. Might want to just elect to avoid that. Run out through Deep Cliff would be a better option this morning to avoid big traffic building in that part of Soweto, top end of Soweto. The N3 stays very heavily back to crash blocking some lanes northbound before Modderfontein. Traffic parking all the way back to Germiston. The N12 and R24 routes coming in from Ekurhuleni. Heavier you get to the on-ramp into that N3 traffic at Galilees, the heavier the traffic gets. The N1 North just queuing up towards the William Mandela off-ramp. Traffic starting to backlog through towards the Malabongwe Drive exit. Durban, just watch for a crash. N2 going south just around the old airport area, not really causing a delay, but you don't want to be trundling through there and all of a sudden come up onto a crash scene. Looks like traffic issues coming out of Palmview again this morning. JG Champion, the R102, a little bit heavier than normal. There were some traffic light issues affecting things at that junction yesterday. And Cape Town, very heavy mist around the region is probably further spread, more widespread and probably thicker than it was yesterday. So give yourself extra time to get through safely. Everything will be on a go slow, including the N2. Big backlogs from Spine Road through the airport runway. And we're just getting some reports filtering through protesting on Baden-Powell at the N2 highway. So watch for some disruption there. And then Baden-Powell from Strandfontein through to Coastal Park, hugging the coast towards Muizenberg's a heavy queue. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Intel Lenglachela, good morning. How are you doing?
Morning, Stephen. I'm good, thanks.
Asian markets, US markets, the JSE, how are they looking this morning?
Well, markets have been struggling to remain firm. We saw U.S. stocks start yesterday's trade in the green, but at the close, markets were back in the red, led by losses posted in the tech sector. A market fave, Nvidia, closed the day almost 4% lower. Local markets, in the meantime, trading mixed, with the all-share flat shedding 0.01% at the close. Investors back at home were digesting easing inflation numbers and a downbeat retail sales print. Things, however, are totally different in Asia, with markets kind of shrugging off concerns and kicking off the day in positive territory. It's green screens across the board on that front. And now shifting focus to currencies, the US dollar pulling back from near 6 months highs as the market sort of consolidates the gains we've been seeing over the past week. This has worked for the rand, and on the back of this, we saw the rand seeing some relief, trading at 18.99 to the dollar.
And then the luxury markets under pressure, and obviously this is reflected in the LVMH results.
So we've seen that market in particular being hit by a slowdown as the pandemic era shopping boom came to an end. Around 2021 to early 2023, we saw upbeat demand for luxury products, but as inflationary risks spiked and interest rates remained elevated, demand started to wane because consumers started spending less. Analysts from consultancy Bain expect the market for personal luxury goods to grow 1 to 4% this year. That's down from an estimated 8 to 10% in 2023. The slowdown in demand, as you said at the top, played out in LVMH's results. Sales at the world's largest luxury company declined 2% in the first quarter as consumers bought less luxury bags, less champagne, and less high-end makeup. One of its top-performing regions, China, recorded declines, with sales in Asia falling 6%. The group, however, is still positive about its prospects, pegging hopes on the global economic recovery.
And then Ster-Kinekor announcing job cuts, closing cinemas.
Stephen, it seems like growth in the online streaming market has come at the detriment of the cinema business. To be quite honest, I don't even remember when last I was at a cinema. Now, those shifts in consumer trends are weighing on Ster-Kinekor as there are less and less people at cinemas. I think it's about to close 9 cinemas and plans to cut over 200 jobs. Those jobs will be cut from the cinemas, the CEO's office, marketing, sales, human resources. Quite a lot of departments will be affected. Now, the announcement comes less than 2 years after it exited business rescue and after it received about 250 million rand in cash injection.
Khayelitsha, thanks very much indeed. Do appreciate it. Of course, back in an hour, more business news through the day here on SAFM.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Rust Advocate Sipho Mantula, good morning.
Steve, over refresh morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in Tunisia yesterday.
Stephen, he has been to that place, Tunisia, 4 times, but this time for the first time as a prime minister, engaging with the prime minister of Tunisia, Professor Keïta Said, and dealing with many issues, Stephen, from education to energy. But what is interesting is the issues around the migration of young people from Tunisia going to Italy, that they are looking at training almost 12,000 young Tunisians who can be legally accepted in Italy, because we are aware of these issues of young people leaving the Mediterranean Sea going to Italy, now that the Prime Minister was in Tunis yesterday to engage with the government of Tunisia.
And then in Libya, the special representative for the United Nations Secretary General for Libya and head of the UN support mission there has tendered his resignation.
You know, Abdullah Batil, Stephen, has been in that role since 2022. And what was critical was that he has been trying to engage on the post-settlement, or what we call political settlement, in Tripoli, in terms of looking at the elections that have been delayed for many years now. And what he has raised now for him to resign and tender his resignation directly to the SG, Antonio Guterres, was that in his mediation efforts, there have been stubborn resistance, unreasonable expectations, and also from the Libyan politicians. They've been giving a tussle and a difficult terrain for him to can operate, Stephen. Hence, he had to resign. Hence, it is important once you lose an envoy or a mediator in such conflicts, it also weakens the UN system in terms of mediation.
And then in Barbados, their ambassador to the UN says they want a new international special tribunal to get reparations for the slave trade.
Stephen, this is David Komisang, who has been active in Barbados. He was speaking before the Permanent Forum on the People on African Descent in Geneva, raising the important issue that there's a need maybe to set up the special courts to seek reparations for the transatlantic slavery and its legacies that it has left behind. That session, Stephen, it was very important. You'll recall that even the World Conference Against Racism dealt with the issues of what happened with slavery, what happened to the issues of reparations, and the question of the African diaspora. Hence, in the AU, you have them as the 6th region in the AU structures. But David Komisong coming very clear, Stephen, saying that it is important for the United Nations system to look at this court as a special tribunal.
And the Electoral Commission's Forum of SADC countries undertaking a visit to our Electoral Commission. Is this a solidarity visit? Does the IEC feel it needs the solidarity?
No, Stephen, it is very important because the same electoral commissions that our Electoral Commission of South Africa is also a member of the SADC Electoral Commissions Forum. Their visit is ending tomorrow. They have started it on the 14th. It is led by by Zambia, Malawi, Namibia. Remember, Zambia will be the head of the SADC Observer Mission, Stephen, in South Africa. Very important that they are meeting with different civil society, the media, academia, and more so even the University of the Land, Unisa also yesterday, Stephen, launched its observer mission, what we call citizen observer mission. It's not a domestic observer mission, Stephen, domestic and international. We are all doing the same observation. But what is important is that this observer mission is always to come and look at the state of readiness, Stephen, in terms of what is the state of readiness in terms of our elections come May 29, and also special votes and many amendments that have happened so far in our electoral space.
And then in our archives, this day, 18th of April 1980, obviously following on from yesterday's archive.
That's quite true, Stephen. It's a public holiday today in Zimbabwe, in Harare. It's Independence Day. It's a Freedom Day in Zimbabwe, Stephen. 18 April 1980, when Zimbabwe was liberated from its colonial master, United Kingdom. And there, Robert Nesta Marley was there, Stephen, was invited by Robert Mugabe, the late Robert Mugabe, to celebrate those independence moments at Rufaro Stadium in the heart of Highfield in the township of Zimbabwe. Very important, Stephen, those moments. They were said there were more than 11 heads of state who traveled to Zimbabwe for that celebration. And as we said yesterday, it was the lowering of the Union Jack and also the taking up of the new name of Zimbabwe coming from Rhodesia. Despite challenges that Zimbabwe is still facing, Stephen, today is a public holiday. They can still reflect 44 years ago what happened. Asante Sana SG, as was still leading the conversation, SAFM, observing the Freedom Month.
Rest Advocate Sipho Mantula, really appreciate it. Thank you. Back, of course, tomorrow. More news from our continent through the day. 18 minutes to 7.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, good to hear from you this morning. May well be about what's happening with the Electoral Commission. May well also be, of course, around heroin. We'll talk a bit more about that in just a few moments. Crime as well in Khayelitsha, such a big issue at the moment. And then comments on the campaign trail. Julius Malema was talking yesterday. John Steenhuisen was talking yesterday. Other people talking as well. Voice notes coming through on 0614 104 107.
Steve, this is KM. You know what? All those people who are there, the political parties, it's not that they are there for service delivery so that people can better their lives. They all want to go to union buildings and become president and control the money of the state, to put their hands into the cookie jar and eat the money. All of them, they are going there and convince us we should vote them. They want only to become president, to go there into the union buildings. Thank you very much.
Sure, very cynical view of politicians, but I can kind of understand how we get where we are. You know the number, 17 minutes to 7.
Join Smile Foundation for a movie night under the stars featuring Sing 2 on Saturday, 20th of April at Old Ed Sports Grounds. To book, visit smilefoundationsa.org. This is an SABC supported initiative.
The Tunisian red and yellow outfit want to smile out of the field of play to emphasize why they are also called the Smiling One. But Masandawana believe there's a humongous reason why they are Bafana Bastyle. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Champions League semi-final. Experience the exhilaration of African football. ES Tunis FC tackles Mamelodi Sundowns FC. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 3. This Saturday, 20 April at 8:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
Well, it's day 22 of no load shedding. Eskom confirming yesterday this is the longest period of no load shedding since September 2022. That was still during the pandemic, of course. At the same time, the energy regulator NERSA are approving a new manual or a new system, really, to help Eskom and municipalities deal with intense load shedding if something goes very badly wrong. And we've seen national blackouts recently in places like Kenya over the weekend. Nigeria suffered a national blackout. Nhlanhla Gumede is the regulator member responsible for electricity regulation at NERSA. Mr. Gumede, good morning.
Good morning today.
This new manual, it's got a great name. It's called NRS 048-9. What is it supposed to do?
It's actually a grid code. It's a protocol. It's been named like this since 2010 when it first emerged after our first load shedding in 2008. So the first version was in 2010. This is the third version of the NRS 048-9. It's just a grid code. It's a transmission grid code.
So everyone gets very excited about these things because what you're doing is you're preparing for the worst possible thing to happen. Okay, let me go back a little bit. The worst possible thing to happen is a national blackout. What you're doing is making sure that that doesn't happen, and you do that using this code. And everyone gets very excited because you'll have, stage 16 load shedding in there. That doesn't mean it will happen. What you're doing is you have this to make sure that doesn't happen. Is that right?
Correct. In fact, to explain it properly, because we basically have codes for almost everything in the electricity sector, whether it's a transmission code, it's a distribution code, it's a generation code. This particular one just happens to be one that actually manages. It's supposed to assist the systems operator in terms of operating the system in this manner. That says we almost all of us have got this particular app on our phones, which tells us if we're on loads on stage 6, when we're going to be load shared and the number of hours. But beyond stage 8, we didn't have anything. So what it meant was that in the event, which is an unlikely event, but in the event that we couldn't meet, say, 50% of the load, it left that at the whim of the operator of the day. But it does not mean that it is a likely scenario. We should have, from day one in 2010, when we had this code, have looked at these stages all the way up to stage 16. We're just correcting that now.
And stage 16 is electricity, what? Once a week you get electricity?
Well, stage 16 is when, I guess, how do I explain this? It's when it's most likely not even going to be about generation. It's probably be if we've got a collapse, for instance, of the transmission network. So if the transmission network, for whatever reason, is broken down, like what happened in Texas, again, it's unlikely for us, but in terms of what happened in Texas, so you've got capacity to generate, but you can't transmit. Now, the question is, how then do you maintain the system's integrity? That then says, as they repair the transmission line, you don't have to then go to a black start and start up plants. So you actually island certain plants so that the minute the transmission line is back on the system, you can then start you can then begin to transmit. So that's what that stage is. So it depends how long that repair would take. Would it take the 32 hours that is envisaged? Unlikely. It would probably be a lot shorter.
Okay, I understand the point of this, and I get that you're preparing for the worst. But I also we know that most councils probably can't really implement stage 6 and beyond, and some can't even do above stage 4. So for example, in Joburg City Power have told us that they don't have enough people to switch substations off and on from around stage 4. So, I mean, we can have a plan, and Eskom may have the resources to implement it, but I don't think that councils do, and isn't that a problem?
Not really, because the idea here is that national control in Simapen can actually switch off, can control power across the country. It's just that some districts, councils do have the capacity, and therefore they apply, and they're given the right to actually do that. But in cases where a district control office is not able to do that, that national control does that on their behalf. And I'm sure you've had situations where I think in Guruleni, or in some councils that have promised to actually comply with the code, and when they don't, then national control then takes over.
Yes, no, I remember that very clearly. And Mr. Governor, from what you can see, it would seem to me we're probably further away from a national blackout now than we've been for quite some time. I mean, the chances of a blackout are actually receding. It's becoming less and less likely.
The fact of the matter, Stephen, is that Eskom alone, I'm not even talking about IPPs, just Eskom alone has got over 45,000 megawatts of capacity. Our maximum demand, even on a cold day, we actually had a cold spell not too many days ago. The actual demand was 29,000. We have capacity in the system as long as that fleet is actually working. Now, so it's quite clear that whatever the programs are in terms of fixing Eskom plants, if those are working, then we clearly don't need to actually have any load shedding. So we are really just hoping that the new CEO is winning the fight of actually just getting those plants to operate. That's all. But capacity is there.
And Nhlanhla Gumede, thank you. The regulator member responsible for electricity regulation at the energy regulator, Unisa. 10 minutes to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Two major protests that you need to know about. One in Joburg, Soweto Highway, main Noordgesuk area, top end of Soweto, all blocked off with barricades, burning tyres and rubble. That is putting terrific pressure around the Klipsveld Valley Road. The Soweto Highway options, they're very busy anyway, the best of times, but with closures of routes, partially closing the Soweto Highway, partially closing parts of the new Canada Road, has put a lot of traffic pressure back around that Soweto circle. So if that's your normal way out, just give you an example, the Klipsveld Valley Road's already queuing back beyond Orlando Stadium, so it's a very heavy backlog. Maybe you want to reroute out through sort of Barra Hospital area or out through the Ben Nordia route that takes you down towards the M1 and Rancho. Go that way. Just avoid the route into the Soweto circle. The other protesting is in Cape Town, the N2 inbound protest at Khayelitsha. The N2 is currently closed with burning tyres driving in towards Cape Town at Baden-Powell. There's also an impact outbound, and the Baden-Powell bridge is heavily backed up. Might be a good one to avoid if you're coming in from Somerset West or heading out. Think about a reroute that would take you via the R102, Stellenbosch Arterial, and the R300s. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The Spanish princess tells the riveting story of Catherine of Aragon, a woman who has an eye on the English throne, and nothing and no one is going to stand in her way. It's a vivid and captivating reclaiming of Catherine's story, which has historically been overshadowed by her infamous marriage to King Henry VIII. Tune in to drama, plots, romance, the twists and turns. Stay for the suspense. Channel your inner royalty with The Spanish Princess. Starts Saturday the 6th of April at 9:30 p.m. only on S3.
Real savings, real benefits. Here's what real clients say about OUTsurance.
My name is Alan. I'm 71 years of age and I live in Douglasdale. I'm paying 554 Rand a month for my 2022 Nissan Magnite.
Want a car insurance premium that'll blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote. It's quick, it's easy, and it could save you hundreds of rands every month. Here's Amy.
To anyone who has not reached out to OUTsurance, what are you doing? Reach out today.
Blow your mind, not your paycheck. SMS out to 30754 and see for yourself why OUTsurance was voted Best Car Insurer 2023 by the Star and Pretoria newsreaders. Here's Yusuf.
It just shows that OUTsurance is top of the tops when it comes to insurers.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
The Royal Club says victory on home soil is non-negotiable, but Ghanaian outfit Dreams FC can smell maximum points as a dream come true. The capital of Egypt faces the capital of Ghana. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Confederation Cup semi-final. Catch Zamalek Sporting Club up against Dreams FC live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 this Sunday, 21 April at 6 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
6 minutes to 7, you know the number 086 000 2032. New research looking at the extent of the impact of the drug heroin is having on our society. And you often hear reports about nyaupe or a new mixture involving a nyaupe. It seems that really these drugs or these names are just masking the fact that it is actually heroin. Andrew Schreiber is a technical advisor at the TB HIV Care and researcher at the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Pretoria. Andrew, good morning.
Good morning.
We hear about nyaupe all the time. Are we really talking about heroin when we use the word nyaupe?
We are, and I think one of the challenges is that there was a common discussion that it was some novel substance, and as a result, it's delayed our implementation of harm reduction and treatment interventions for opioid dependence, because heroin is a kind of opioid.
Okay. Can we assess, do we know how much heroin is actually coming into South Africa?
We can guesstimate, because it's an illicit trade. We have information that we can gather from various perspectives. So work that we've done is we spoke to people who use drugs and people who sell drugs to get a sense of, how much drug they either use or sell on a regular basis. We've spoken to, and colleagues of mine have worked with the police to get a sense of data from seizures. Other colleagues of mine have looked at what's happening with the price of drugs over time, to see what the demand, how that affects the price. And we also get a sense from the global picture of what's happening with the market sizes in different areas where the biggest markets are. So, for example, in Europe or in North America. And that gives us a sense of potential proportions or changes in trends over time. And by piecing those different pieces together, we get an understanding of what the likely scope is. We also have information for people who access services, so either people who are accessing what we call harm reduction services or people who are accessing treatment services, to give us other insights. And with that, we can get a picture of the very large scope of the work. And then South Africa's gotten to the stage where I think there are not many families who don't know someone who is using or has a problematic condition related to opioid use or other drugs.
You suggest, in fact, up to 1% of our population may be affected by this. In other words, 1% of our population is using heroin.
So that's what the proportion works out to among adults. And as I said, there is uncertainty in the methods that we've used. But we do know from recent surveys done among adults in the household surveys that the HSRC does that, up to 10-15% of adults report drug use in the previous 3 months. So we do know that it's very big. As we do more data, we will be able to better refine our estimates. And so we say those data with uncertainty. But what is very clear is that there's been an increasing trend over the past 20 years. And what's very clear is it's now much more visible. If you drive along any of our central districts in our major CBDs or even in rural towns, you can see a lot of people who are using heroin, often in open spaces, often they're injecting. And that's often just the tip of the iceberg.
I suppose there are two big things that have led to this. The one is that life for so many people, I think for almost everyone, has become so much harder over the last 5 years, and life before that in South Africa was incredibly tough. And there are very few ways to sort of get into a job or to get a sustainable income. And the second thing is, from what I can see, for various reasons, the price of heroin has become very, very cheap. Are those sort of two of the bigger factors that lead to this?
I would say there's also a third factor, which is that globally there's a huge demand for illicit drugs, particularly heroin. And so South Africa is part of the global trade. And most of the heroin kind of that passes through South Africa is destined to Europe, to the European market, but a substantial proportion stays for our local drug market. And we're using heroin as one of the examples, but we know a similar trend has been happening with crystal methamphetamine, crack cocaine, is that people use drugs for a reason, and historically, in many contexts, when the socioeconomic situation is really poor, the likelihood of substance use and harmful substance use increases. And combined with that, aspects of the illicit trades, gangsterism, multi-country organized crime, all of those things combine to there being a demand, there being a market, and then it being affordable and available.
Andrew Schreiber, thank you very much indeed. Technical advisor at the TB HIV Centre and a researcher at the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Pretoria. I'm sure it's affected someone in your life. I mean, it really is. It seems so difficult to deal with. Well, in a moment, we'll speak to the Patriotic Alliance. It's something we're going to do with political parties. I'll tell you more about it after the news. And then, do protests work? There's a big protest in Klipspruit right now. Do protests work just before an election? Looking forward to that conversation. You're with SFM leading the conversation, 7 o'clock.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, Unisa speaks on dishonesty among some postgrad students, and Malema says load shedding will be back after elections. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. The University of South Africa has confirmed that it has identified several incidents of dishonesty among postgraduate students. There have been cases of alleged cheating, with some students blaming technical glitches on the online invigilator app. The university's vice principal for Institutional Development, Ramogwai Magano, says they are investigating around 1,400 students. Magano briefed the media in Pretoria yesterday.
The remaining cases, which are about 1,456, pertain to pure academic dishonesty, which includes, among others, plagiarism, non-adherence to Turnitin, which is a software that is used to check as to whether the submission includes plagiarism or any other copied material. And the formal hearings in this regard already have commenced on the 25th of March.
Former Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane's matter will be heard in the High Court in Pretoria today. She's seeking the court's urgent intervention in the Office of the Public Protector's decision not to pay her the 10 million rand gratuity due to her impeachment. Mkhwebane was removed from the Chapter 9 institution following Section 194 inquiry into her fitness to hold office. The Bloemfontein Magistrates Court in the Free State has withdrawn all charges against a man accused of the murder of 16-year-old Machaka Khatebe. 27-year-old Ntlantla Josie appeared in court yesterday, and it found that there was insufficient evidence against him. Josie was accused of kidnapping and killing Khatebe, whose body was found in Phase 9 in Bloemfontein in December last year. In January, Josie was denied bail. The NPA's provincial spokesperson is Mojalifa Senekwatsani.
The charges against the accused in the Machaka Khatebe's murder have been withdrawn by the Bloemfontein Magistrate Court after the court found out that there was insufficient evidence to continue with the prosecution of the accused. Investigations that are led by the police are continuing this matter.
In some election-related news now, EFF leader Julius Malema has called on members of the public to brace themselves for the resurgence of rolling blackouts immediately when vote counting starts after next month's elections. Consumers are enjoying one of the longest rolling blackout-free periods in years. This as Eskom says it has sufficient generation capacity. Malema was addressing residents of Eldorado Park in the south of Johannesburg, where he was on a campaign trail yesterday.
Let me tell you, the suspended load shedding is going to come back on the 29th at 12 midnight when we count the votes. Because you know these criminals, they are going to switch off the electricity and steal the votes. So they must find Eldorado Park red. When they switch off load shedding, you switch on the torch. Hey, group, we know you. So load shedding is man-made. We can fix it.
In other news now, the Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi says the COVID-19 pandemic had initially scuppered his department's employment program. He has denied allegations that it is an election ploy. The aim of the program is to alleviate poverty through training unemployed people and assisting distressed companies. It is envisaged that the 23.8 billion rand initiatives will assist to create job opportunities. Nxesi was speaking in Cape Town during the launch of the Western Cape Labour Activation Program.
We're to refocus on dealing with the calamity, the more than 5 million workers, and they're giving them that 65 billion rand. At that time, we were talking about the total shutdown. Nobody could do the training at that time. However, we said, let's plan properly now, re-evaluate everything, and launch it together with the budget cycle. The budget cycle, unfortunately, starts in April. That it coincides on the eve of the elections. Well, that's a coincidence.
And finally, Qatar says it is reassessing its role as a mediator between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas. Qatar says it was exploited and abused. The BBC's Wyrie Davis reports from Jerusalem.
Qatar has played a pivotal role, along with Egypt and America, in trying to secure a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. It's been a delicate, largely unsuccessful process, but the links that Qatar has with all sides, including close ties to Hamas, are regarded as crucial to achieving any breakthrough. Qatar is now openly questioning chances of those talks succeeding.
Recapping your top story, the University of South Africa has confirmed that it has identified several incidents of dishonesty among its postgraduate students. For SFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 7:30.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports headlines. It's rugby. The Springbok World Cup winning captain Siya Kolisi has stormed into the Time magazine top 100, flying the flag high for Mzansi. And Stellenbosch FC hold their ground in a nail-biting draw against Sekhukhune United. Catch the full details just before 7:30.
SAFM. Guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Update on the N3 in Joburg. The crash scene that caused the big backlog from Germiston through Khayelitsha up to Edenvale has been cleared. There is still a big backlog on the N3 north towards that area, and the N12 and R24 routes are badly backed up, trying to get into that heavy traffic on the N3 via Khayelitsha. The other two big stories we're watching: protesting in Soweto this morning, top end of Soweto, around Noordgesuk, Canada, New Canada area. Parts of New Canada Road are closed, parts of Soweto Highway are closed, and there's a terrific amount of congestion on routes like Soweto Highway, Klipstraat Valley in towards the Circle, and then the N17 going between Soweto Circle and the N1 Highway is very heavy. We're suggesting a reroute through the Deepcliff area. Go further south to avoid that. If you normally would come up from the sort of Maponya Mall area up towards the Circle, just divert out through Deepcliff. You'll get out of Soweto quicker this morning. The other protesting we're watching is burning tyres on Cape Town's N2 at Baden-Powell Drive. The highway is closed. Parts of Baden-Powell are closed. There's very heavy traffic disruption all over that area. If you need to get in for flight connections, consider the R102 Van Riebeeck Road, Stellenbosch Arterial, and Robert Sobukwe as your alternative route in towards the airport area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 after 7, good morning with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. All right, lots going on as always. We'll talk to the Patriotic Alliance in just a moment, and then we'll talk, and this is in response actually to a question from one of you, from a listener yesterday, about do protests work during elections, and why is it that we're protesting during elections in the first place, and what does that say about our system? We thought we'd speak to Dr. Trevor Ngwane. He's the kind of person to speak to in situations like this, and just ask that question. Do you sort of get more bang for your buck as a protester during an election? A little later, and I think this will be important, from time to time you've heard me talk about this, that almost all the people who phone in, particularly to talk about politics on SAFM Sunrise, are men. And, I mean, we have no problem with you calling in, please do. But we would like to hear from more women. And if you look at what's happening in our elections now, only 40% of the candidates on the lists of political parties are women, but women are the majority of voters. Now, why does this happen? We'll have a conversation around that with Lebo Ramafoko in about half an hour from now. You mediate a conversation today, the end of El Nino. What does that matter, and how we are interconnected with things that are happening in the Pacific? What does it mean for you and grain harvest? We'll look at that from 8:30, 9 after 7.
Join Smile Foundation for a movie night under the stars featuring Sing 2 on Saturday, 20th of April at Old Ed Sports Grounds. To book, visit smilefoundationsa.org. This is an SABC supported initiative.
Imagine if you could save time like you save money. A second here, a minute there. Type a little faster, walk a little faster. Or you could stop scrolling on the internet. Just think of all the hours you'll save. Now what if you could take all that time and invest it? Watch it grow. Until eventually, one day, you'd have so much time that you wouldn't know what to do with it all. But unfortunately, time doesn't work like that. It can't be stored or banked. And unlike money, you can't make it back. That's why after 50 years of investing, we've learned that time is the greatest gift of all. And the good news is, if you invest early, time gives you money. And then money gives you more time to do whatever you want to do, even if it is scrolling on the internet. Ellen Gray, long-term investing. Ellen Gray is an authorized FSP.
Match day number 30 will deliver high emotions and tension. 14th and 15th placed VfL Wolfsburg and VfL Bochum must go beyond their limits in the final stretch. Who will climb the ladder to victory? This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfL Wolfsburg versus VfL Bochum this Saturday, 20 April at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
11 after 7. Good morning. Well, we thought with the elections now just 6 weeks away, it was time to start checking in with various political parties. In some cases, we'll see if the parties can actually bring people to our studios. In fact, the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, is due to be here tomorrow morning. We'll get as many parties as we can to come in, if they can. You know how chaotic things get during an election. But we also just want to hear from some of the parties as they go on the campaign trail. And this week, the Patriotic Alliance has been campaigning. In fact, they announced this week they've signed a deal with the leaders of 5 smaller parties. I think most of them operate in the Western Cape. Those parties say they'll support the Patriotic Alliance. The head of negotiations for the Patriotic Alliance is Charles Cilliers. Charles, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
How do these agreements with these smaller parties work?
I think that in our case, it's relatively unique. We've been working with many of these leaders of the parties and the party members themselves for a while in the municipal councils. So it's very difficult, I think, for some parties to contest at a national and even provincial level. So often those voices get lost during these bigger elections. So this gives them a chance to actually be part of something. They're going to be working with us closely, helping us on the ground. And, you know, it's a significant addition to our tally of the votes we see.
Do these parties get anything for supporting you? And let me be quite direct. Are you going to give their leaders positions in a council in return for this, or a position in a province, in a provincial legislature, or an administration, or anything like that?
I don't think that it's quite so simple as a direct quid pro quo. I think that it's got a lot to do with relationships and trust. And I think in time, you might even find that these parties become part of the PA in some way, maybe, but we wouldn't want to dictate to them, right? These are people who've shown leadership in their own right to start these political brands, you could call them. We respect that, right? But ultimately, we really do believe that it would be good if everybody unites behind our banner, call it full-time. If you look at somebody like Noel Constable, who's been the speaker, he's even been the mayor in Beaufort West. You know, he knows a lot about politics. He's got a lot of experience. He brings a lot to the table. The idea of sending someone like that to Parliament, it's not so much a quid pro quo, but it's actually a person who has serious insight into how to improve the country. And so we're saying let's put people in Parliament who can add value.
I mean, it's interesting because when a smaller party works with a bigger party, in many cases here and in other countries, the smaller party gets punished by their voters, right? So you might find that some of these smaller parties maybe cease to exist after this election just because they worked with you. And the same can happen, to you. You would be a party smaller than, say, the ANC. If you work too closely with the ANC or another bigger party, you could be punished by voters too. I mean, this is the risk that parties take. I mean, do you think everyone's aware of that?
I think with every risk, it's about cost benefit, right? So I think they're all perfectly aware that they might find themselves being swallowed by the PA. And I think for some of them, they look at that and they say, okay, is that going to be a net good or a net bad, even if that happens, right? And I think that's why they're willing to trust the PA. I think this has a lot to do with Gayton, right? He, especially in person, he can be a very reassuring figure, and I think a lot of people just trust the man, and that's why they're willing to work with us the way they do.
I don't know if you've seen interviews between him and I, Charles.
I have. I mean, I may not. I'm not expecting you to start campaigning for us any day soon, Stephen, but
Sure.
Yeah, maybe you two should have a coffee sometime.
Well, that would be so boring. So Gayton McKenzie said this week the DA would fall below 40% in the Western Cape. Now, I've seen some polling suggesting the DA could fall below 50% in the Western Cape, but not 40%. I mean, what is that based on?
Look, I think a lot of that is based on a view that Gayton in particular has that there's something missing from the polling, and that I don't think he believes the polling is unbiased at this point, right? We won't know until the votes are counted, but there's a sense, especially with Gayton, that he doesn't trust the polls anymore. And I think that what's reinforcing that idea for him is that there's this incredible sense of panic with the DA around the Western Cape. And it's not the kind of panic that suggests that they're falling just below 50. The way that they're reacting to this election is the kind of panic you'd expect from a party that's dropping a lot further. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Okay, well, we'll put that to John Steenhuisen tomorrow. You're the head of negotiations for your party. I presume you're preparing for coalition negotiations after the election. Would you prefer to work with the ANC or the DA? I mean, my gut suggests you'd prefer to work with the ANC.
No, actually, I would say we don't have a preference. Personally, I've actually put a lot more effort in. I think my full title is quite long. It's head of strategy and negotiations, and so most of the time there's not any negotiation going on. And what's been very frustrating is the amount of effort that I've put in to trying to get to various deals with the DA all over the country. By now, if everything had gone well, we would have been in a coalition with only the DA. I mean, that was actually what we were trying to achieve. We've tried to do that a number of times. There's a twofold aspect to this, Stephen. And number one, it's that the DA doesn't want to go into coalition with the PA before these elections because it allows them to point at us and say, oh, don't vote for the PA because they're just going to donate your vote to the ANC. So it's a way of lumping us in with this swart gevaar rhetoric and saying, no, don't work with them. And, of course, nobody really wants to listen to us when we say, but guys, we're willing to work with the DA, but it's them who keep showing us the hand, right? And then if you speak to the DA, they'll say, oh no, the PA are a untrustworthy partner, they betrayed us, and they'll roll out a number like we betrayed them in 8 separate councils, which is completely unfair. And of course it's become a big lie for them, and like with all big lies, they repeat it ad nauseam. And so it's become, in a way, an accepted truth in this country for many people who support the DA that, they can't work with the PA because they're unreliable. It would have been good to actually put that to the test and try, because my argument is that if you look at what's to be gained by actually taking over something like 8, 9 different councils in this country, it's worth suffering a bit more if you have to, for the sake of the voters, and let's try. So I guess they're hoping that they can keep us out with this strategy. If it doesn't work, then they're going to have to talk to us, we hope. They're obviously going to speak to the likes of the Freedom Front first, but we feel we're going to be at the table, and if we are, we're willing to work with the DA. I don't think that there's any proclivity to work with the ANC first and foremost.
Charles Cilliers, thank you very much indeed. Head of Strategy and Negotiations at the Patriotic Alliance. 19 minutes after 7.
For years, Outsurance has been saying they'll save you money on your car insurance, or you can ask for 500 Rand or 1,500 Rand cash if they don't. Here's Fundi, 46 from Brackenfell.
I was not happy with what I was paying. I heard about the 500 Rand from Outsurance, but they give me lesser amount for my car. I'm paying 523 Rand on my 2013 Hyundai iX35.
So here's how it works. SMS out to 30754. We'll give you a no-obligation car insurance quote. If the quote is less than you're currently paying, you'll end up saving money on your car insurance every month. And if it's more than you're currently paying, you can ask for 500 Rand. And if you've been with the same insurer and claim free for 3 years or more, tell us you want 1,500 Rand.
Give Outsurance a call. It's a win-win. You can't lose.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
For the first time in 30 years, the ANC is set to lose its majority. Opposition parties have united as the multi-party charter for South Africa.
A strong democratic alliance with a proven track record
Can anchor a new government that serves the people.
But a new government that works is only possible if you vote for it. Let's unite and rescue South Africa. Vote DA.
This political party advertisement was paid for by the political party concerned. The views expressed in this advertisement are those of the political party and not those of the SABC.
Match day number 30 will deliver high emotions and tension. 14th and 15th placed VfL Wolfsburg and VfL Bochum must go beyond their limits in the final stretch. Who will climb the ladder to victory? This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfL Wolfsburg versus VfL Bochum this Saturday, 20 April at 3 p.m. Live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
21 minutes after 7. You've heard from Robin this morning about the protests in the Noordgesig area in Soweto. That's had a big impact on the community there. And yesterday, we took a question from a listener who asked why communities almost have to protest during an election to get the attention of political parties. And if you look at our recent history during elections, we often see big increases in the number of protests. I must just point out that actually in any year, you will have more protests during winter than you do in summer. National and provincial elections are often held in winter. But even so, we still see protests during campaign season. Dr. Trevor Ngwane is the director at the Centre for Sociological Research and Practice at the University of Johannesburg. Dr. Ngwane, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and your listeners.
We've seen this correlation for years, a higher number of protests during an election season. Does it work for communities to protest during elections?
Well, it should, because remember, the people want to feel that they can affect the process. But of course, the election itself provides itself as a solution. But it does certainly get people to focus on politics and to think seriously about who to vote for. And there's been that old debate between the ballot and the box. And it seems from the evidence that people do both.
After an election, does anything change for communities that have held protests? I mean, I think there's some cases where people protested before this election, they protest again at the next election.
Oh, yes, but it all depends on, how the government specifically responds or grants a concession or not. Usually, the government will try and give some concessions, But of course, the problem is not that the government simply doesn't want to give concessions to do service delivery. The government is internally crippled because of its budgetary policies, because of mismanagement. So often, that hope, that we protested and something will happen turns into despair. Sometimes it turns to more anger. But if there is anger, then they'll protest again.
In some ways, Doctor, I mean, this must be a real condemnation of our democracy. It shows if people have to protest during an election, I mean, if our processes, if our democracy was properly accountable, elected leaders would respond to problems long before the protest, and that's not happening.
Oh, yes, but remember, Stephen, these are the limitations of what I can call bourgeois democracy, because basically the idea is that you tick a box, once in 5 years or once in 4 years, depending. But it should not be like that. Citizens should be empowered on an everyday basis to effect and affect, how government works. Of course, we've got public participation exercises and structures like ward committees, whatever. But it has been proved that these are basically ignored and used in a tokenistic way by the government. So we have to really agree with you, change something fundamentally about the nature and structure of our democracy.
Isn't it because people in the past haven't changed their vote? So yes, they've protested, but they haven't necessarily changed their vote, and parties have known in advance that they won't change their vote. So if that changes now, maybe it will, maybe it won't, but if parties can't take votes for granted, does that change things? I mean, is that going to make parties more accountable? I mean, that's what should happen, isn't it?
Oh, yes, this is most important. The problem with the ANC leadership, it got complacent and it takes people for granted. And also it's internally, let's say, self-corruptive. So, yes, if there's a possibility of actual change, real change in power, even coalitions, because we've had this bad experience with coalitions in some cities, it doesn't mean that they don't work. I think they do work, over time.
Do you think after this election anything's going to change? I realise that's a big question. But I mean, in 5 years from now, we're going to have more big protests, or in the next local elections, where we have more big protests before an election.
Our problem is that our country is caught up in a broader international, global capitalist crisis. So, it depends how the national government actually responds. It depends who takes power. But I think that we are in for a rough ride.
Dr. Trevor Ngwane, thank you, Director at the Centre for Sociological Research and Practice at the University of Johannesburg. You're with SAFM 27 minutes now after 7.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Sia Khayelitsha on the list of Time magazine's 100 most influential people. Took them long enough.
Yes, that's how Sia, he sprinted this time onto that list, leading from the front, off the field as well. What a legacy for him. His two-time World Cup winning captain, that remains untarnished. But his future as the Bok captain is still a hot topic, with debates on whether he'll lead again. But off the field, he's lauded for turning rugby into a beacon of hope and unity. Hence, Sia Khayelitsha etching his name on Time magazine's 100 list of most influential people. Cricket action, Sri Lankan women skipper Chamari Atapattu upstaging Proteas captain Laura Wolfart in an incredible match built on 2 innings as records tumbled, with the visitors securing a 6-wicket series levelling win at the JB Marks Oval in Potchefstroom last night. Batting first, Wolfart scored the highest ever individual score by a South African woman, thrashing 24 fours and 4 sixes in her unbeaten 184 off 147 balls, to lead her side to a mammoth 301 for 5 in their 50 overs. However, Atapattu even better, hammering 26 fours and 5 sixes in her unbeaten 195 off just 139 balls, as she broke her own Sri Lankan individual highest score record, while their chase was the highest ever in all of women's ODI cricket, with it the first time that a score of over 300 has ever been chased down. Meanwhile, the Gujarat Titans Titans, they were bowled out for their lowest Indian Premier League total of 89 as they lost 6 wickets to the Delhi Capitals. The Capitals chased down their target of 90 inside 9 overs. Soccer, Mamelodi Sundowns will go ahead with their African Champions League semi-final second leg tie against Esperance at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria. This is despite the logistical difficulties of the stadium being used the next day for the United Rugby Championship clash between the Blue Bulls and the Welsh club Ospreys. The match will be played on the 26th of April with an 8 p.m. kickoff time. Action last night saw Sekhukhune United and Stellenbosch FC sharing the spoils. It was a tense 1-1 draw at the Peter Mokaba Stadium in a DStv Premiership action, while SuperSport United were held to a 1-1 draw by Polokwane City at the Lucas Moripa Stadium in Atteridgeville. Real Madrid, they beat the holders Manchester City 4-3 on penalties, reaching the Champions League semi-finals after the last 8 tie ended 4-4 on aggregate. Bayern Munich, they had a 1-0 win in their Champions League quarter-final second leg, claiming a 3-2 aggregate victory and knocking Arsenal out of the competition. Here's Bayern Munich boss Thomas Tuchel.
I think the first half for me was more of a chess game where nobody wanted to sacrifice a figure on the board. Nobody wanted to make the first move and open a bit of a gap. So it was hard for us to find moments of acceleration. The second half, we demanded and encouraged our team to show more personality, to take a little bit more risk, to shorten the distances, play more over the shoulders and not just the obvious pass.
More sport for you on Sunrise. Top of the hour, I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning to you. We'll talk more about women and politics in the next little while. You're with SFM leading the conversation at 7:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, the Employment and Labour Minister Thula Nxesi says the country's high unemployment levels have prompted his department to launch a program aimed at addressing the problem. He says under the program, poverty will be alleviated through training unemployed people and assisting distressed companies. The University of South Africa has confirmed that it has identified several incidents of dishonesty among postgraduate students. There have been cases of alleged cheating, with some students blaming the technical glitches on the online invigilator app. And Sweden's parliament has passed a law lowering the age at which people can change their legal gender from 18 to 16, making the process easier. The law passed with 234 votes in favour and 94 against. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Good and bad news. The good news is the earlier crash on Joburg's N3 north at Modderfontein, which backed everything up to being cleared. But the bad news, and the news you don't want to hear, it's been replaced by a broken down vehicle in pretty much the same place. So all of that traffic that backed up into the crash just is unable to sort of move freely and clear away. So big queues from Elands interchange at Germiston right through Galilees up to Modderfontein Road. Behind that, the N12 starts the queue from Jet Park, the R24, halfway between Barber Road and Edenvales, where you'll pick up that queue. Both of those roads heavy, trying to get through Galilees and into that N3 queue. Also, crash on the Mike 1 South at Crown, so very heavy coming down from Empire Road through Braamfontein into that. And Soweto's a mess this morning. Closures of part of the Soweto Highway between the Circle and the N1. Closures of New Canada Road going to and from the Soweto Highway. So that's just forcing a lot of traffic pressure on Klipstrand Valley Road, around the Circle and the N17 and the top of New Canada Road. There's some very heavy traffic in that top end of Soweto this morning. Make sure you're trying to get through that. Another crash, they happen regularly this time of morning. N14, Krugersdorp Highway between the R55 exit and Barakfontein if you're on your way in towards Pretoria. Using the N14, it is heavy. Durban, a breakdown on the N2 in the roadworks before Gateway. That's a heavy backlog coming through from the Queen Nandi Drive side. And a crash around Tweeny Hill this morning, delaying traffic arriving in from Toti on the south coast. Cape Town, just an update on the protesting that erupted earlier on the N2 at Baden-Powell. The N2 has been reopened. The tyres have been removed, but it's been replaced by a crash. So if you're on your way out of Cape Town, there's still some heavy delays on the N2, passing Khayelitsha into that crash scene. And Baden-Powell stays heavily backed up between sort of Macassar Road and the N2 as a result of that earlier protesting as well. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Intaleng Lachela morning again. Asian markets, US futures. How's it looking?
Well, Asian markets trading in the green after days of uncertainty in markets that fueled risk-off sentiment. Tokyo's Nikkei up 0.23% and China's Shanghai Composite gaining close to 0.4%. Markets benefiting from a stronger yen and won as pushback from authorities in the US against a stronger dollar helped stabilize currencies in Asia. Let's move over to Wall Street. Futures shaking off that tech-led loss as all indexes turn green. Investors on that end are awaiting first quarter results from Netflix and Taiwan's TSMC. Back at home, the JSE pretty flat, closing down 0.01%, while the rand trades slightly stronger at 18.99 to the dollar, of course being boosted by a softer greenback.
And then inflation easing in March.
Yes, there's some relief for consumers as inflation eased to 5.3% on an annual basis in March from 5.6% in February. Now, the slowdown was thanks to a moderation in food price increases. On a month-on-month basis, CPI, however, increased 0.8%, and core inflation, which strips out items such as food, fuel, and energy, slightly eased to 4.9%. Now, despite the moderation in prices, economists aren't too optimistic about the possibility of rate cuts anytime soon. That's as inflation remains at the higher end of the SARB's target range of 3 to 6%, and economists don't expect inflation to fall below 5% within the first half of the year, and so are moving back those expectations, pegging a rate cut in September.
And then retail sales slipping in February.
So that print showing that local shoppers are still under pressure. Retail sales fell 0.8% year on year in February. This marks the second month of consecutive declines, suggesting that the sector didn't really fare well in the first quarter. We are, however, still awaiting that March print to see the full-on performance of the first quarter. But now the main negative contributor to the February print was a decrease in retailers that trade textiles, clothing, footwear, and leather goods. So basically, consumers seem to be spending less on clothes. Now, moving forward, things don't seem like they'll change anytime soon, at least in the short term. FNB economist Siphamandla Mkhwanazi said in a note that retail volumes reflect a subdued consumer demand environment, which should continue in the near term. He does also point out that towards probably the second half of the year, we should see some sort of relief as they expect those rate cuts to start coming through.
Thank you very much indeed. Intaleng Lachela, of course, at the business desk. More from her tomorrow and more from the business world through the day here on SAFM. 24 minutes to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Right, good to hear from you this morning. Lots of things to talk about. Protests just before elections. Do they work? I mean, why do we have to do this? You heard the Patriotic Alliance earlier talking about coalitions. Seem to be fairly angry at the DA, or frustrated with the DA rather. The DA will respond, I'm sure, to what they said. But very interesting to watch that play out as well. So I don't know if you've got a view on coalitions and coalition negotiations. I mean, interesting also just to reflect on what Julius Malema said yesterday, Business Day reporting this morning, that he says he's quite happy to work with Mkhonto Wesizwe and former President Jacob Zuma. And you know the relationship between them has always been very difficult. Still waiting, of course, for the Electoral Court reasons for their judgment as to why they've ruled that former President Zuma can, in fact, contest the elections as a candidate. Was always going to be, I think, on the ballot paper. So those issues this morning. Unisa has all sorts of issues, it seems, around what they call academic dishonesty. So people talking about that a little bit. Cheating, basically. And I don't know how you stop that with correspondence, but there are ways that you can do it. And then when did you last go to a cinema? I thought that was interesting. You know the number 086 000 2032. Conversations coming through on all of these issues this morning. Jacques is on the line from Cape Town. Jacques, hi. The DA strategy, good morning.
Oh, hey, Stephen, how's it?
All right, go for it.
Listen, man, the thing is, you guys...
Oh, Jacques, are you there? Jacques? Are you with us? All right, we seem to have lost Jacques. We'll try and get Jacques back for you. Jacques, I don't know if you're there now. No, we seem to have lost Jacques entirely. Sorry about that. Also, of course, all sorts of things going on. Voice notes coming through this morning on 0614 104 107.
Good morning, Stephen, and your listeners. It's William Dlulo of Richards Bay, Matraka. Stephen, I foresee danger. I repeat, I once said Julius Malema will become a head of state if ever ANC gets below 48 or 46%. I still stand by my words. Coalition of MK and all these other parties will put Malema as the head of state. I rest my case for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, well, let's see other voice notes on that issue.
Morning, Stephen, EFF, the freedom fighters. All along they had no weapons to fight ANC, to destroy ANC. Now they've got a weapon, which is Umkhonto. They're going to use Umkhonto now to destroy ANC. You remember that tea, drinking tea there by Nkandla between Malema and Jacob Zuma. That's where they negotiated to arm EFF with Umkhonto. Anonymous.
All right, thank you, Anonymous. Jacques on the line from Cape Town, you're back. You wanted to talk about the DA,
Stephen. Yes, Stephen, what I'm saying is that the fact that the DA is in panic, it is a fact. And they are looking at the PA as a small party. But if you look at the way that they're campaigning now to say that, you are doing this, you are doing that bad. But at the end of the day, do the work on the ground. And if you really ask the question, and the reality of the matter is, what are they doing for the bulk people of Cape Town? They are doing. They are not catering for the average citizen of Cape Town. That is just a reality.
Yeah. Look, I mean, there are all sorts of ways to try and work it out, but the disparity in Cape Town is huge, like it is in other parts of the country.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. But at the end of the day, if you look at the PA, we've been working since the COVID time, handing out food parcels. You must see the food parcels that the DA handed out in Worcester now the other day. It was a disgrace. They're giving dog food to the people. Helen Zilla was standing the weekend with the ladder, with even the incorrect tools. At the end of the day, if you use that strategy, use it correctly. Ashley Souls always say, there's an art of politics and an art of politics. PA wants to manipulate their constituency to say, look at what the PA is doing. But if you really come to the ground and you really look at who's working, there's no other political party working at this point in time in Cape Town like the PA, and that's just the reality.
All right, that's the view of Jacques on the line from Cape Town. I don't think there's dog food being given to people, but I see what you mean about the policy of it. And Jacques, clearly, it seems a strong supporter of the Patriotic Alliance. So it's very interesting to sort of see different views on all of these things, really. Bongiwe, hi, good morning. You're on the line from Rudaput. This issue of going to cinemas, hi.
Hi, Stephen. I wanted to say I stay in Rhodeport North towards the Craiglestone area. And the movie house close to where I stay, a ticket is between 150 rand to 175 rand. And I find it to be very expensive. However, at the Westgate Mall, a ticket is about 35 rand. What a difference. So my kids are always at the movie house every second week because it's affordable. Yeah. And it helps a lot. Whenever when I keep them busy, I drop them off there and they do whatever, and it's affordable. But these are the same movie houses, movie companies. So it just depends on where the movie house is situated, I guess.
So it's the same company, and one's 150 rands and one's 35?
Yes, it's the same company.
Sheesh, that doesn't make any sense. That's just bad strategy.
Yeah, so if you can check it out, there's a casino close to Craiglestone.
Yes.
Just check there what the movie house is, and check the Westgate, and then you'll see the companies and the prices. Just the difference is amazing.
I wonder if one subsidizes the other, and that's before you look at the price of popcorn, which you can, buy a pack of popcorn in a supermarket for what, 13, 14 rand. Make it yourself, and you'll get tons of popcorn out of that.
Exactly, and also the other thing is that when you buy a package, like a ticket and a drink and a popcorn, they have got those packages. That's where they make their money because those are quite pricey, and no kids want to go in there without the entire package. So that's where they make their money. However, the other movie houses where a ticket is expensive, and then you're just like, what am I going to buy the kids then? because then you're going to spend 300 rands for a child.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Bongiwe on the line from Roodepoort. Thank you. Really appreciate it. We'll talk more about that through the morning. 17 minutes to 8.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Confirmation from the Electoral Commission this week that only 40% of the candidates on the lists of parties in the elections are women, despite the fact women are the majority of the population and the majority of voters. At the same time, it seems very few parties are actually deliberately trying to campaign on the issue of ending gender-based violence, or more accurately, attacks by men on women. Lebo Ramafoko is a GBV activist and also executive director at Oxfam. Lebo, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Firstly, we have this situation where women are the majority of voters but the minority of candidates. Why does this keep happening?
It keeps happening, Stephen, for a number of reasons. I think all political processes are fundamentally patriarchal. And you will recall that even in a country as the US, women had to fight and earn the right to vote. So the very core and DNA of the infrastructure was not really about men and women participating. We are a new democracy and we started well. By saying there will be equal representation. But representation doesn't mean that there is an enabling environment for equal participation. And the more there is inequality in any society, is the more, even when you've got laws of equal representation, those that are marginalized, which still across all indicators are women, will not get a fair chance. But more importantly, over the years, what we have seen in South Africa is that our political landscape has become much more violent. Now, while there may not be a lot of physical violence and we've got a democracy on the contestation of ideas, which is far more progressive than even the so-called developed nations, the engagement is violent. The war of words, the way that this engagement happens is not a space where many women feel like they can advance their ideas. And we have normalized it. So even often when people discuss politics at a community level, at a local level, the space is really one where male energy, male bravado, male masculine energy is the way in which that engagement happens. And because that has been set up as a standard, even political parties don't see it and don't ask themselves, how do we enable participation not only of women, but of all marginalized communities. And the other reason is the issue of money. It takes huge amounts of money for political parties to start, for them to be able to campaign, for them to be able to get a voice anywhere else in society. So you can imagine if you have not been close to power, and when I talk about this, I'm talking about financial and economic power, and you are in a rural area elsewhere and you wanted to start your own political party and advance the rights and the needs of women, when you had been kept away from the economy, how possible that is going to be.
It's so interesting that you say that conversations around politics, women don't participate, because we find here on SAFM, and I find, let me just say I for myself, that almost all of the people who phone in to talk about politics on SAFM Sunrise are men. And if you look at the letters section of a newspaper or the comment section of a news website, it's actually the same. So, I mean, what you're suggesting is that it's not just in community meetings, it's almost across the entire public sphere that I can see testosterone dominates.
Absolutely. And again, Stephen, participation is not only numbers. Participation is intentionally seeking the voices of the voiceless. And in some instances, it seems as if, as a society, we can understand it. But we have not shifted patriarchal power. And I'll give you just a very simple example. If you were in an environment or you had an event and you know that there were deaf people in that event, you will create an enabling environment. If you want them to participate, you will make sure that you've got a sign language interpreter. You will make sure that they are able to participate. And I don't think any political party right now is sitting with
seem to have lost Lebo Ramafoko there, unfortunately.
Hear me?
Yes, we can.
You
All
hear
right,
me?
sorry, yes. You're saying
yes.
you're saying you don't think any political party...
I don't think any political party has sat down and has even gone down on the ground and basically said, how can we enable your participation? And I'll give you an example. I've worked in the development sector all of my life. There would be times where women actually will tell you that if you needed to engage with us between this hour and that hour, it's not possible because these are other activities that we want to do. And this is the other point that I want to make. For as long as care work in the world, particularly in unequal societies, falls on women, their participation is going to dwindle. How many women are able to sit in the evening when the care work of children, when 60% of children are growing up in single-headed households, mainly headed by women, are cooking and looking after children? Where is it if the meetings are in the morning, where women who are cleaning my house, your house, and every other middle-class person's house are sitting out there or looking after children or whatever, are going to be when men are gathering and meeting? And I don't think any political party, and if they are very few, that they even pay attention of saying, how do we create an enabling environment for women, particularly marginalized women who are domestic workers, women who are participating in care work? Because when you are a woman in our society, regardless of what work you do, the care work that makes homes function, the care work is still expected to be that of women. So even for women that are professional, women who want to take political life, the battle you always have is who will do care work. At best, it will be done by another woman. At best, all of us are operating the way that we are, even in our professions, because there is a woman who has left her home and her children to come and look after our children. And for that reason, if you don't look at care work and why it is unpaid, why it is done by women, and what it means then for women to participate in the kind of political, civic life that we need, they will never participate. You will have a tick box exercise that says, well, we've got 50% representation. Ask yourself which women are able to give you the time and the dedication. And we have seen across political parties how violent, even in the way that the political leaders deal with their own women in their own parties. And therefore, that space is not a conducive space. So, in fact, it seems as if you say women can participate, but you punish them for participating by either not creating a conducive environment or making sure that the women in your own party must toe the line or else.
Lebo Ramafoko, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate the time. GBV activist, executive director at Oxfam. 9 minutes to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, the eastern side of Joburg has been a real mess this morning on the N3. We had an earlier crash at Modderfontein Road, which backed everything up. And as soon as that was cleared, it's been replaced by a broken-down vehicle, which is still there before that Edenvale off-ramp. So it's a big queue from Alberton and Germiston into Elands Interchange and all the way up through Bedfordview, through Galulies and on towards Edenvale. Behind that, the N12 is backed heavily to Jet Park, and the R24 queuing through Edenvale, trying to get into that N12, which then jams trying to get into the N3 North. So it's all a bit of a mess. Crash on the Mike 1 South at Crown. That's very heavy coming down from Houghton Drive this morning. So Parktown through to Crown's all backed up. The N1 North under pressure from Randburg through to Sunninghill. A stationary vehicle before you get to the Rivonia exit is causing that additional delay. Also a crash on Vitkoppen Road just by Waterford Drive. So from North Riding, there's a big backlog of traffic heading up towards the Four Ways area. And of course, Soweto remains a mess with the closure of parts of Soweto Highway and New Canada Road with protesting. That's putting a lot of traffic pressure on the N17 that links Soweto Circle through towards the M1 Highway. Also possibly related, some heavy traffic around the Meadowlands area as well. Over to Durban this morning, the N2 North is under pressure. A crash at Tweedy Hill is causing a delay coming out from Toti. You've then got queues between the M7 and Westwood Mall due to roadworks, and then you've got another big queue lining up from Queen Nundy Drive through to a breakdown in the roadworks before you get to the Gateway exit. Cape Town's been some protesting this morning around Khayelitsha Khayelitsha, Baden-Powell and the N2. The N2 has been reopened both directions, but there's some heavy queues on the outbound side, passing Khayelitsha towards Baden-Powell. There are some police on the scene. There's also been a crash there. Baden-Powell south of the N2 towards Macassar Road remains closed, and there's a lot of pressure on routes like Old Fora Road, Spine Road going in towards Khayelitsha, and also the Macassar Road between the N2 highway and Macassar. A lot of traffic diverting around this closure of Baden-Powell Drive. Also misty around Cape Town, so continue to give yourself plenty of time to get through conditions safely. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
And we will buy 500 cars, and we will buy 500 more. Just to be the one who buys your car, will come to you and offer more. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Five-time champions plan to capitalize on home ground advantage, while 11-time champs have a huge strategy to dominate the battle from the first whistle. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Champions League semi-final. Experience the exhilaration of African football. TP Mazembe FC versus Al Ahly FC, live on SABC1 this Saturday, 20 April at 2:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
5 minutes to 8. Good morning. Well, comments yesterday from officials in the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy that they want to make it easier to formalize what's called artisanal mining or small-scale mining. One of the reasons you want to do this, of course, is there's so much illegal mining happening in South Africa. If you're able to legalize artisanal mining, the idea would be that people would leave illegal mining and go and work in those mining operations instead. Makosonke Botelezi is the head of communications at the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. Makosonke, good morning.
Good morning, Steve, and good morning to your listeners.
I remember, I think it was several years ago now, the first time we had a sort of legal artisanal mining operation. It was legalized. Everyone was talking about it. The entire thing seems to have gone quite quiet since then. Has it just been too difficult for people to actually get through all the regulatory processes?
Yes, it has been, Steve, and that is why we are being intentional this time around with the artisanal and small-scale policy that seeks to make it easy for those people operating in that sector, you know, to be part of the mining industry and enter into the mining industry. So it is for this purpose that we have this policy, so that they can then go in and formalize and be able to benefit from the fund that we have and other services that are offered by government department to small businesses.
Okay. I mean, obviously people first need places to mine. Are there those places available, areas where you can actually conduct safe artisanal mining?
There are places, Stephen. For example, I'll give a practical example. We issued an advert in January inviting artisanal and small-scale mining to apply for the fund. And we did receive some application, over 500 applications, and we shortlisted 21 of those, which showed that there are areas, and they have permits. Those people already have permits to mine, so there are areas where they can mine. Others, particularly in rural areas, you'll find that there are industrial minerals such as sand, there's clay, there's limestone, and the traditional authorities give them that place to mine, but the only problem is that they don't have the authorization from us. They don't have the permit. So yes, there are places that they can mine.
Much of the illegal mining that we see at the moment is happening in formalized mining. So in other words, there will be a big formal mining company that's been operating in a place for 20, 50 years. They leave the shaft, right? There's all sorts of arguments about that. And then legal miners will go underground in that shaft and mine there. So an old gold mine, for example. But artisanal mining is a very different type of operation. It's not really underground. You don't go in a shaft, you don't dig, you don't use explosives to blast, things like that. Do you really think that people who are involved in illegal mining now would switch to artisanal mining if it was made easier?
To be honest, Stephen, and I'm glad you've made that distinction. We don't think they are amenable. Those ones are associated with organized crimes, the ones that you've mentioned, and there's gangs involved, and there's shootings. A practical example is we're going to have workshops. Let's say we have a workshop in Rivoli, and we're going to announce on radio, we're going to have a workshop, artisanal small-scale mining. All people who are involved, they can come so that we can take them through the process. I don't think they will come and attend that workshop, such people. And ideally, if they want to be formalized and they want to, recognize and benefit, it's such people who can come and do this informally and in a safe and healthy way to the environment. But I don't think they are amenable to that. Those ones are criminals.
Okay, I mean, it's very, very difficult to stop that kind of illegal mining. And I mean, you could pay me all the money in the world, I still wouldn't want to go and be a police officer told to go into a mine shaft to get illegal miners out.
Yeah, that's the thing, because you have to extract them from underground, and we understand they are there for quite some time, and they get food from people, from the ring leaders, and they get given all these arms, and they are supplied by those people who are benefiting from this illegal activity. So it would be difficult to get those people and formalize them.
Makosonke Buthelezi, thank you very much indeed, Head of Communications in the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. In a moment, we will hear from the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, about the new white paper on citizenship, immigration and refugees. It's very complicated. We'll stick to some of the big things. I will also ask about the path to citizenship under the new system that will be coming in. Don't forget your mediated conversation, the end of the El Nino phenomenon, what that means. You're with SFM leading the conversation. It's 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, Nxesi provides rationale for employment program, and Sweden votes to lower legal age for gender change. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. The Employment and Labour Minister, Thulas Nxesi, says the country's high unemployment levels have prompted his department to launch a program aimed at addressing the problem. He says under the program, poverty will be alleviated through training unemployed people and assisting distressed companies. Nxesi was speaking in Cape Town, where he launched the Western Cape Labour Activation Programme.
Only substantial economic growth and development will rescue the country from the unacceptable high unemployment rate. But in the meantime, we also believe that the government working with all the stakeholders has a major role to play in mitigating unemployment and creating and preserving jobs.
The University of South Africa has confirmed that it has identified several incidents of dishonesty among its postgraduate students. There have been cases of alleged cheating, with some students blaming technical glitches on the online Invigilator app. The university's Vice Principal for Institutional Development, Ramokgwai Magano, says they are investigating around 1,400 students. Magano briefed the media in Pretoria yesterday.
The remaining cases, which are about 1,456, pertain to pure academic dishonesty, which includes, among others, plagiarism, non-adherence to Turnitin, which is a software that is used to check as to whether the submission includes plagiarism or any other copied material. And the formal hearings in this regard already have commenced on the 25th of March.
The Eastern Cape government is optimistic that job opportunities will be created after the vehicle manufacturing giant Volkswagen Group, Africa's multi-billion rand investment in the province. The group is to invest an additional 4 billion rand in its existing Kariga plant in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro. It will see skills development and the bolstering of the province's economy. The group's chairperson is Martina Biene.
So mainly the investment here in the plant, which we undergo, is really to secure the current level of employment, to secure a stable 3-shift operation with 4,000 people being employed directly at VWSA. Because what normally happens in a cycle is the models you produce are aging and you've got less demand in the world, and then you'll need to come up with a new model to keep the level where you are. So here in the plant, it is really to secure and future-proof the employment we are having.
In some election-related news now, EFF leader Julius Malema has called on members of the public to brace themselves for the resurgence of rolling blackouts immediately when vote counting starts after next month's elections. Consumers are enjoying one of the longest rolling blackout-free periods in the years. This as Eskom says it has sufficient generation capacity. Malema was addressing residents of Eldorado Park in the south of Johannesburg, where he was on a campaign trail yesterday.
Let me tell you, the suspended load shedding is going to come back on the 29th at 12 midnight when we count in the votes. Because you know these criminals, they are going to switch off the electricity and steal the votes. So they must find Eldorado Park red. When they switch off load shedding, you switch on the torch. Hey, crook, we know you. So load shedding is man-made. We can fix it.
And finally, Sweden's parliament has passed a law lowering the age at which people can change their legal gender from 18 to 16 and making the process easier. The law passed with 234 votes in favor and 94 against. Though Sweden was the first country to make gender transition legal in 1972, the new law has sparked intense debate. Some say it will make a quote-unquote important difference, but critics say more research is needed. Recapping your top story, the Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi says the country's high unemployment rate has prompted his department to launch a program aimed at addressing the problem. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 8:30.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM Sports Headlines, soccer sees Stellenbosch FC extending their unbeaten run to 23. They're in a draw for the tight race for CAF Champions League spots. And in tennis, Rafa Nadal hints at their 2024 retirement unless he's able to compete regularly following his Barcelona Open exit. Tune in for the details just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good morning. The N3 North remains heavily backed up coming from Germiston and Alberton on your way up through Galulis and in towards Edenvale. This morning, an earlier crash has just been replaced by a broken down vehicle in the same spot. So all that traffic that backed up during the crash has been unable to sort of clear through. In fact, I'm just getting an update. That vehicle has just been cleared. So that's going to start to ease the traffic. But it is bad. Accused from Elands Interchange all the way through to Mollefontein Road. Behind that, the N12 coming in from Jet Park Craft Road areas heavy. The R24 backlogging as you arrive from the airport. The closer you get to Galulis, the heavier that traffic becomes. N1 North from Randburg up towards Sunninghill, very heavy. There's a breakdown after the William Mandela exit up just beyond the main road bridge, which is causing a delay. Soweto remains heavy, particularly the New Canada Road side. Soweto Highway and parts of New Canada Road are currently closed. N17 taking a lot of the diverting pressure in and out of the Soweto area this morning. Durban, a crash between Pavilion and Paradise Valley. If you're on your way out of town, there's some queuing pressure there. Breakdown still with us on the N2 before Gateway, so it's heavy this morning from Queen Dundee Drive, and that crash between Toti and Prospect and around Tweeny Hill still backlogging northbound traffic as well. Cape Town Baden-Powell Drive closed between the N2 Highway and FTK Masemola. That's due to burning tyres in a protest. There's also been a crash on the N2 between Baden-Powell and Spine Road. So you've got traffic being held by that collision, by some heavy mist, and by the need to divert away from the closure of Baden-Powell Drive. Heavy on the N2 through Khayelitsha. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 after 8, good morning with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Due to hear from the Home Affairs Minister, Dr. Heroin around the new citizenship, immigration and refugee bill. Basically, those three issues. It's very, very complicated. I've made the point before, being Home Affairs Minister is not easy because you're trying to sort of put into law what humans do. Your mediated conversation in a little while, we'll be talking about the end of the El Nino oscillation phase. That's the sort of technical term for it. What that means is what hopefully will be the end of the really hot, dry weather that we've had. So we'll be talking about that, the impact also on grain prices, all of that very important. All of that to come. You know the number, by the way, 086 000 2032. It's 8 after 8.
Match day number 30 will deliver high emotions and tension. 14th and 15th placed VfL Wolfsburg and VfL Bochum must go beyond their limits in the final stretch. Who will climb the ladder to victory? This is the Bundesliga. Football as it's meant to be. Catch VfL Wolfsburg versus VfL Bochum this Saturday, 20 April at 3 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Weekday nights on S3 are about to get lit. BBC Primetime will give you access to a hand-picked selection of BBC Studios' award-winning dramas, documentaries and factual entertainment with titles such as Luther, Critical Cheaters, Top Gear, Live at the Apollo, Louis Theroux, Forbidden America and more. You simply don't want to miss out. Tune into S3 from the 1st of May from 9 p.m. until 11 p.m. to channel the best of British entertainment with BBC Prime Time, only on S3. Open up.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Let's start with Mabula in Tshwane. Mabula, hi. Town hall meetings, good morning.
Hi, Stephen. I'm a man. I'm calling with regards to politics in your show.
Thank you for your identifying, yes.
Yeah, that doesn't help your stance to balance, you know. So,
yes.
Yeah, the guy from PA was very refreshing. He's not the reason why I called, but I enjoyed the interview. The town hall meetings, I mean, discussions that I think SABC has, Sakina is leading some, and other media houses, are really, really critical because that's where you really feel the pulse of the nation, you know, face to face. But my wish is that we could have them throughout. I mean, I know maybe getting space in the media is not always easy, but I wish we could have them throughout because every year around this time, municipalities by law are supposed to have public participation to communities with regard to their draft IDPs. And that is an official manifesto of a municipality. You're not even just talking political party if you think about it. It's a manifesto of a municipality. So those town halls need to be shown in the media because those meetings do happen and sometimes people feel just a tick box exercise because there isn't much focus on them, if you get my point.
No,
so
sure.
I wish we could have more of this throughout the year because as I say in law, it's supposed to happen every year, you know.
Mabule, that's so interesting. Thank you on the line from Tshwane. And I wonder if just having the media there sort of changes how people behave and react and all the rest. But, I mean, you raise a good point. I just wonder, I mean, some town hall meetings, I'm sure the regular ones could be, you know, live streamed, but then people sort of ignore them. So I don't know. But Mabule, thank you. It's a really strong point. 11 after 8.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, confirmation yesterday from the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Heroin, that Cabinet has now fully endorsed the new white paper on three major issues, and they're all being brought together. It's citizenship, immigration, and refugees. And I've made the point to you many, many times that one of the problems and one of the reasons life as a Home Affairs Minister is so difficult is that you're trying to put into law what human beings do, and you can't predict what people do. You can't predict what we do. And that's one of the reasons it is so difficult. And people can move around in unexpected ways. But as you know, we've had a huge number of problems with all of this. So I think almost everyone would agree that a change is needed. Well, the Minister is on the line for you now. Minister Motsoaledi, good morning. Welcome back to SFM Sunrise.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning to the listeners.
There are many different aspects to the white paper. For you, what are the two biggest changes? What's the biggest change do you think that's being made?
Well, firstly, we have got three pieces of legislation in South Africa since democracy. the Citizenship Act of 1995, the Refugee Act of 1998, and the Immigration Act of 2002. And the biggest change here we want to do is that we want to repeal all of them and press a reset button. Start from the beginning and enact them afresh as one seamless law, no longer three different acts working in different silos. So we want to repeal all of them and start completely from the beginning and correct some of the mistakes that might have been there. That is the first important thing. The second important thing is that we never, on the 1st of December 1996, when we joined other nations of the world, which has been members of the United Nations Convention on Refugees of 1951, when we joined them on the 1st of December 1996, we never made use of Article 42 that allows countries to put some reservations on issues that might not be suitable for them or might be difficult or even outright impossible for them. And that is the change we want to do. May I add the third one? Also the issue of bringing skills into the country via visas. We want to make massive changes such that people who come into the country to bring investment, to bring skills, find it easier to do so. So those are the three main changes. I may add the fourth one because you ask of only two, but the fourth one, the issue which is the developing countries for small businesses, barber shops, we are also making radical proposals there. So those are the areas I can identify.
All right, I appreciate it, and I know there are many more other changes, and people must go through it themselves. Minister, there's always, from 94 anyway, there's been a path to citizenship. In other words, if you came from another country into South Africa, there's been a way for you to become a South African. I think almost every country in the world has this. Under the proposals you're making now, would that path to citizenship be easier or harder?
Well, it depends. It depends on from which direction you look at it. If you want to do it like the Grootes, it will be harder, and that was part of the reason why we are looking at citizenship. But if you are following all the legalities, it won't be hard for you. If you want to do it the Bushiri way, by first defaulting permanent residency, which is the last step to citizenship, it will be very difficult for you. So it depends on how you want to do things and from which corner you come from. It's not uniform for everybody.
Okay. The other thing, and this is always very difficult, but there's a large number of people who are living here illegally, and they do not have the legal right to be here. They're undocumented. And at some point, and I don't know, and in a way, I don't think this really should be your problem, but I fear that it sort of comes under the Home Affairs Department. From the changes that you're looking at, will the status of those people change in any way? Would there be a route to citizenship for them, as controversial as that may be? Or will they just stay as they are now, basically illegal, full stop?
I mean, how do you give somebody citizenship when they're illegal? Honestly, Stephen, I don't think any country does that. Because then where will it stop? Well, people know that all you have to do is to enter a country illegally, and somehow you will be legalized and given citizenship.
Well, countries have done amnesties. That's the legal phrase. They'll do amnesties. I take your point. I'm not arguing with you about it. I'm just trying to find out if there's any change to their status. That's my only question.
No, there is none. And let me add, Stephen, if that was going to be the case, why would United Nations in 1951 have to come with conventions, the rules under which when you are running away from persecution or from war, the rules under which you enter a country and how the country must handle it? There are international rules in the convention. There is also the Protocol of 1967. There is also the OAU Convention of 1969. All of those are giving guidance to countries on what they must do so as to avoid illegality. And I've heard many people trying to believe that all those rules means a person can enter your country illegally, and it's international, it's convention, it's constitutional. There is nothing like that.
No, sure. No, I was just asking the question for a point of clarity. One of the big problems that you've had, and this has partly been because you've had 3 different laws, is the administrative problems you've had in your department. I think you've been very open about it, Minister. Will the proposals you're making in the white paper make the administration of all of this, and it's a lot of administration, will it make the administration easier for your department?
Absolutely. Let me take an example of visas. We've got 17 different visas, different. Some of which are in different sections of the law, but they actually mean one and the same thing. And to differentiate between them is an administrative burden to Home Affairs officials. Just to give you an example, we have got a business visa, we've got the corporate visa, we've got the intercompany transfer visa. I mean, all those are business visas. Why can't it just be one business visa? Why, yes. Then we've got a spousal visa, section 11.6, spousal visa, another section, relatives visa, first degree relative. Why can't they just be relative visa, all of them? So those ones, once you consolidate them, yes, it will make the administrative burden much easier. Then the other area, Stephen, and I heard you state, not in this interview, but another interview Mr. Chapman, and a lot of things were conflated, and he mentioned lots of things that are not the intention or are in the white paper, like the issue of refoulement, sending people back from where they come from. That is provided for in Article 33 of the United Nations Convention of 1951. The mistake we like to correct there, Stephen, is not to send people home who are deserving. The mistake we did there, which is our own mistake we want to correct, is that article has got 2 sub-articles. The first one is about stopping you from sending people where they will hang or they will die or they will be persecuted. But United Nations itself knew there are exceptions. There will be thugs like Khayelitsha, who will come here, Fulkens Kaishima, who will come here having committed heinous acts. The mistake Parliament made is that when they domesticated that part of the Act in 1998, they domesticated only the first part that says don't refoul. The second part that gives you exceptions about people who are undesirable is not in our laws. And we want to change that because it exposes us to people who are criminals, who are genocidaires like Fulkens Kaishima. If I may explain to you, Fulkens Kaishima killed 2,000 women and children during genocide in Rwanda, but he came to South Africa and became a refugee. How should we allow such to go on? Simply because we did not domesticate the section that allows us to deal with such criminals. That's what we are doing. Now, when Mr. Chapman was talking to you, it's as if the whole of Section 33 were throwing it away. And you conflate it with Section 42 that allows us reservations. They are not the same. And may I ask people to read the white paper thoroughly and understand this fact before coming with their emotion.
Right. Minister, thank you very much indeed. I appreciate the time. Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi is the Minister of Home Affairs. A debate, of course, around migration, which is going to go on for a very long time. 20 minutes after 8.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Tabo on the line from Kroonstad, the MK party. Tabo, hi, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. I just want to be straight and talk straight to you, Stephen. I am a member of EFF.
Okay.
And what we see now, and I'm 73 years old now, a lot of people, all around as people they can see, people are angry. And the motive of voting for MK is to MK, it was a army wing of the ANC. People want to fight. I want to tell you straight. I see all over. I was in Petersburg, Kimberley, all over there. Their intention is to fight. People are in trouble. I see white people are sitting in the street, no food, standing in the N12, no food. The country is in a big problem. What I want to come straight, President Ramaphosa, I thought maybe he did be involved in Anglo Gold as me. I worked 35 years with those guys, how to run a private state surrounded by private entities. President Ramaphosa, he was not working in the mine there at Carltonville. He was only representing workers. He knows nothing about service delivery, giving service to private
So,
states.
so Thabo, your central point, please.
My central point is that a lot of people are voting MK for fight the government who is doing nothing for them. That is what I wanted to stress straight to you, Stephen.
No,
Yes.
Thabo, thank you on the line from Kroonstad. Look, I think there is a sense of frustration among some communities, and who can blame people for being frustrated with the situation we have at the moment? 22 minutes after 8.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
Well, it's been very interesting to watch, and we've had conversations around this, around what's happening to cinemas. You heard Bongiwe phoning in a little while ago, complaining about the fact that the cinema near her costs you around 150, 175 rand per person to go and watch a movie. There's a cinema in another shopping mall run by the same company, she says, where a ticket's 35 rand, and she sends her kids there. But we see, and this has all been sparked by a conversation by Stay Kinnickle, that they're going to close 9 cinemas. Gus Silver is a journalist and author. Gus, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Stephen.
It's so interesting to watch this process. It seems inevitable that, the death of the cinema. I mean, there'll be sort of small cinemas, or there'll be independent cinemas, I suppose. But the big cinema chains are kind of done.
Yes, it's actually very sad. I mean, it's sad for the people who will lose their jobs. It's sad for the complexes. But I think this is, in some ways, this has happened before in history. In the 1950s, when television started becoming a big thing, there was the death of cinema was predicted once again. But this latest round, I think, is directly tied into the economy, but also to the way our habits changed during the pandemic, when we kind of cocooned in our homes and discovered that streaming channels were, so full of entertainment. So in some ways, it's a cultural thing, a habit thing.
There have been 2 big movies that came out in the last couple of years that I really wanted to watch uninterrupted. The one involved aeroplanes and a man who's not so young anymore, and the other involved someone who may have helped to design a nuclear bomb. And I found in both cases, when I sat down to watch those movies, I watched them at home, I was interrupted. I was watching with my wife, but you'd be interrupted by the dog or by this or by that. And I kind of regret not seeing them for the first time in a cinema. Is there still space for that cinematic experience?
Yes, I think there definitely is still space. There's something about going to the movies that kind of heightens our emotions. And that's why people, going to watch a horror movie or a comedy or a musical, that kind of shared fear and laughter is a very primal thing. And I think last year we saw this happening with Barbie and Oppenheimer, both of which were huge event movies that did draw people to the cinema. So, on an economic level, the movie houses are kind of endangered, but on an emotional level, the right movie, I think, will still get people going back into the cinema for that, as you say, uninterrupted experience.
Is it also the quality of movies? I mean, would I be fair to tell my son that the Marvel movies have just literally killed movies?
Yes, well, the Marvel kind of franchise has also been struggling a little bit. They've had a string of huge successes and then a string of kind of quite unexpected and unprecedented flops. So going to see a superhero movie with your friends in the cinema is obviously a very different experience to doing so at home. But the whole idea of being able to curate your movie watching experience at your own time, your own mobile device, etc., is very compelling. And unless the cinema chains and unless Hollywood kind of comes up with the big movies that draw people in, it's going to be a continuing trend that we'll watch at home.
Is this going to strengthen the rise of television series because there's no point in making a movie? And I realize that I think for a lot of people there is still the sort of Sunday night sit in front of a streaming service kind of movie thing. People do that. So what I'm trying to get to is, are we going to see as many sort of 90-minute productions as we've always seen? Or do you think more and more the sort of episodic format is going to become more popular than it is now?
That's right. I mean, while movies are kind of struggling, TV or so-called TV streaming series have entered a golden age, and I think that's what people talk about more than anything else. And some streaming channels are trying to get back to that whole idea of releasing episode by episode rather than all in one go to get people talking. But those are the things I think that people talk about, except for the big event movies. People talk about the series they're watching. That's the big thing. What series are you watching at the moment? So definitely episodic entertainment has got the upper hand at the moment.
Gus Silver, thank you very much indeed. Journalist and author. I didn't ask him if he eats popcorn, but who knows. It's very interesting to see how all of this is changing. 27 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. The latest from Stellies.
Yeah, they're strategizing for that CAF spot like a grandmaster in a game of chess. Stellenbosch, they've had their unbeaten run extended to 23 matches, but they did miss a big opportunity last night to widen the gap between themselves and the rest of the chasing pack as the race for the second CAF Champions League spot intensifies. This follows Sekhukhune United's late equaliser during that 1-1 draw played at the Peter Mokaba Stadium in Polokwane last night, with Orlando Pirates, Sekhukhune United and SuperSport United breathing heavily down Stellenbosch's necks. Now, SuperSport United were also held to a 1-1 draw by a very spirited Polokwane City during their DStv Premiership clash at Lucas Moripa Stadium in Attridgeville last night. Tennis action, Rafa Nadal's injury comeback was ended by Alex de Minaur as the 12-time champion waved goodbye to the Barcelona Open, and that's possibly for the final time. Nadal lost 7-5, 6-1 to the world number 11 Alex de Minaur in round 2. Nadal, a 22-time major winner, has indicated he plans to retire in 2024 if he's unable to compete regularly. In the women's tennis action, the Tunisian Ons Jabeur avoided an early upset as she overcame Ekaterina Alexandrova from a set down at the Porsche Tennis Grand Prix taking place in Stuttgart. The world number 9 lost the first set 6-2 as she lost her serve on 2 games, but she managed to compose herself and won the second set 6-3. She secured the victory in a tiebreak in the final set to claim her first win in 6 matches. She will face the world number 14 Jasmine Paolini, and that's in the second round today. Now, Emma Raducanu cemented her recent return to form with a blistering 6-2, 6-1 victory over 2-time champion Angelique Kerber, and that was in the opening round of the Stuttgart Open. The British player has now won 3 matches in a row for the first time this season after her triumph at the Billie Jean King Cup tie over the weekend. Next up for Raducanu is a match against the 19-year-old Linda Noskova. Noskova defeated Yelena Ostapenko, and that was in the first round. And finally, Olympics news. As the countdown clock to the Paris Olympics passed the 100-day mark, the question of holding the opening ceremony over the River Seine loomed large over the milestone celebrations. Organisers have planned a parade of about 10,500 athletes through the heart of the French capital on boats on the River Seine along a 6-kilometre route in the opening ceremony at sunset on the 26th of July. Now, Australia's chef de mission, Anna Mears, twice an Olympic cycling champion, says that the water quality in the River Seine might force a cancellation, but she was also upbeat about the readiness of the French organisers.
Yeah, I don't see that as rumours at all. I think that's just hypotheticals around situations should bacteria levels get to a level where it's not safe. At the moment, it currently is, and we will base all of our preparations and plans based off of what the current plan is.
More sport on Sunrise and SAFM comes to you around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. El Nino, the weather phenomenon and what it means for you as our climate changes. That's next to you with SAFM leading the conversation 8:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, the Operation Dudula movement has accused the Electoral Court of bias in handling its case against the Electoral Commission. The movement has been excluded from appearing on the national ballot for failing to meet the deadline for the submission of the candidates list. Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi says the country's high unemployment rate has prompted his department to launch a program aimed at addressing the problem. He was speaking in Cape Town, where he launched the Western Cape Labour Activation Program. And the mountain fire in the Du Toit Slough Pass between Paarl and Worcester in the Boerland region of the Western Cape has been brought under control. Fire spokesperson for the Cape Winelands District Municipality, Joanne Otto, says clearing operations and the monitoring of the site will continue. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Well, the closures around Soweto are actually increasing. We're looking at the closure of Soweto Highway. That's effectively between the N1 and Soweto Circle. New Canada Road from Soweto Circle right through to New Canada, and partially closing the N17 from Soweto Circle out towards the N1. So those road closures have just intensified, which would suggest the protest around that top end of Soweto is also intensifying. Now, latest on the N3, it remains heavy this morning from Germany Germiston through to Bedfordview. All the issues we had at Modderfontein Road are being cleared, but there's now a broken down vehicle pretty much where that left at Van Buren, so it's heavy up into Bedfordview. The other side, there's a crash at Heldenay, so that's quite slow. Still very busy, N12 and R24, it's into Galulis, and there's a crash coming out of Boksburg and Benoni on the N12, queuing traffic down towards the Jet Park Road exit. Over in Durban, the N2, this breakdown up by Gateway and the roadworks taking absolutely forever to clear. It's been there long enough to have N2 traffic towards the airport backlogging heavily to Queen Nundy Drive. N3, out of Durban, the crash in the roadworks between Pavilion and Paradise Valley, so that's still quite slow go on your way towards Pinetown. And Cape Town, earlier protesting at Khayelitsha has largely been resolved on the N2. The N2's busy both ways, and a part of Baden-Powell Drive that was closed earlier this morning, south of the N2 towards Macaster Road, seems to be reopened. There's a lot of pressure around Khayelitsha up through Mfuleni, but it would appear that the protest-related closures have been lifted. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Attention to all music lovers. The highly anticipated Metro FM Music Awards are finally here. Y'all ready? Purchase your tickets to gain access to the awards ceremony and the live concert happening on the 27th of April 2024 at Mbombela Stadium, Mpumalanga. Yo, we about to have some fun in here. You can now secure your tickets from R300 at www.computicket.co.za.
Yeah, man, this is a big night.
With a star-studded lineup of DJs and live performances, don't miss your chance to be part of this unforgettable celebration of talent and music excellence.
Come on, Mbombela, come through, let's do this.
Hashtag MMA24, Black to the Future. Metro FM, it's where you want to be.
The Tunisian red and yellow outfit want to smile out of the field of play to emphasize why they are also called the Smiling One. But Masandawana believe there's a humongous reason why they are Bafana Bastyle. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Champions League semi-final. Experience the exhilaration of African football. ES Tunis FC tackles Mamelodi Sundowns FC. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABC 3. This Saturday, 20 April at 8:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
26 minutes now to 9 the time. Good morning. On Tuesday, Australia's Meteorological Bureau announced it believes that what is called the El Nino Southern Oscillation has now ended, and that the oscillation is now officially neutral. The way this works out is through measuring the temperatures in the Pacific Ocean. From those temperatures, scientists can determine whether there'll be an El Nino season or a La Nina season. As you know, in Southern Africa, El Nino means it's more likely to be a hotter, drier season. La Nina means it's more likely to be wetter and cooler. If you remember the 3 years of heavy rains, those were La Nina seasons. But the El Nino season that we've just had has had a big impact on our farmers. In fact, some predictions suggest we may produce around 25% less grain this season, less maize, just because of the hot, dry weather. But other things are happening in our climate as well. Just this week, in the United Arab Emirates, more rain fell than at any other time in the last 75 years. We were talking about flooding in the Gulf region. I can't recall ever reporting on something like that before. So then, what does this finding in Australia mean for our weather and what's happening in our climate at the moment? First, Professor Willem Landman is a professor in meteorology in the Department of Geography, Geoinformatics and Meteorology in the Department of Natural and Agricultural Sciences at the University of Pretoria. Then, the impact on our farmers. Dr. Sandile Ndlungwana is the chair of the Grain Chamber of the African Farmers Association of South Africa. And finally, Professor Guy Mitchell is a climate change researcher and acting director at the School for Climate Studies at the University of Stellenbosch. We start then with Professor Willem Landman, a professor in meteorology. Professor Landman, good morning. How can we say with 100% accuracy, or can we say with 100% accuracy that the El Nino system is now over? How do we know for sure?
Well, we can say with 100% accuracy what's happening at the Equatorial Pacific Ocean area because we have measurements that can tell us. We have buoys, we have a moored array of buoys, and we have satellite data. So we can say with a great amount of certainty what the condition is in the Central Pacific Ocean. And at the moment, it says that we are now going towards a neutral state, as you have rightly said. And now what will happen in the future, for that we will have to rely entirely on what our global climate models tell us will be the case.
How does what's happening in the Pacific affect weather in South Africa?
Well, you've also already said that correctly, that when we have an El Nino event, we have an increased likelihood of dry and warm conditions over southern Africa. And when we have a La Nina, which is the opposite phase, we have an increased likelihood of wetter and cooler seasons, like we just had 3 seasons before this current one that's ending at the moment.
So what's the causal link? What I'm trying to get to is, why does one thing affect the other thing?
Well, that's a very interesting question. We believe that what happens in the Central Pacific Ocean, which is effectively on the opposite side of the planet, which is really far away, that forcing gets to us through a so-called teleconnection pattern. And some scientists believe that this teleconnection pattern is translated to us through the Indian Ocean. And there's also strong evidence that the mid-latitudes that involves the Atlantic Ocean plays a very important role in how that signal, that forcing from the Central Pacific Ocean reaches southern Africa.
Okay. If we have the oscillation now moving into a neutral phase, does it stay neutral? Does it automatically move to a La Nina system? Could it move back to El Nino instead?
No, for that we have to rely entirely on models. We can predict whether or not there will be a neutral state that will persist through our summer, and we can predict, even with greater certainty, whether or not this will be an El Nino season once again or a La Nina season. At the moment, the forecast models that we use, both locally and internationally, all point towards the development of another La Nina season. So that means we've had 3 La Nina seasons, 1 El Nino season, and it looks likely that we are now headed for another La Nina season in the 24-25 summer season.
Is that unusual to have so many La Nina seasons and just 1 El Nino?
No, it's not. It's certainly unusual, but it's not unprecedented. We've had similar situations like that already in the recent past. In the 2000s, we've had a couple of La Nina seasons like that, and so it's not really uncommon, but it doesn't happen very frequently. It's the theory says that El Nino and also by extension La Nina supposed to happen only once every 3 to 7 years. So we've had an increase in the frequency of such events, but I don't think it's necessarily related to climate change, for example. This is something that just is possible to happen, and we've just seen it happen in the recent few years.
Okay, you've explained the impact that it has on our weather. How big is the impact? And what I'm trying to get to is, other things happen in weather and climate. So how much of a role does El Nino or La Nina play in how much rain we're going to get?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So if we look at the variance, or what I mean by that is how the changes is from one season to the next, from a dry season towards a wet season. How does the El Nino event, for example, influence that variance? And the answer is only about 30%. So it's actually quite a small amount. Notwithstanding the fact that it's a small amount, that is still the biggest influence that we see from something like an El Nino that's a climate driver. There's other so-called climate drivers that play a role, but they play an even smaller role. And so what we have to do is we have to rely on these climate models that I've referred to before to actually try to see if these models can capture the influence coming from the Pacific Ocean and also from other climate drivers, like, for example, the Indian Ocean dipole. That's another thing we haven't mentioned this in this discussion before. And hopefully that the models are skillful enough to capture these different climate drivers to have as a consequence of that, a skillful prediction of what might happen over us.
You made the point that this is not caused by climate change, but does climate change make the impact from El Nino or La Nina greater? In other words, does it make the impact bigger?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because, for example, if we look at El Nino years, those years are normally associated with warmer temperatures. And there's a clear signal already in the observed temperatures that things are warming up also over southern Africa. So we have a warming trend in temperatures. So we have a warming trend, and on top of that, a dry season as predicted by El Nino, or as caused by El Nino, then of course it will have a bigger impact. So we've also seen some of the work that we've done on climate change and temperatures is that even if we continue to get the same amount of rain as we're getting now in the future climate, and with the expectation of temperatures to rise in the kind of worst case scenario, that we may see that the crops will not really survive because of the temperatures. And when we have an El Nino event on top of the warm temperatures, I think that can be really devastating for agriculture.
Can we, how long does it take from the end of the phenomenon until we actually feel it? So if it's now returned, I don't know if there's a date you can say it happened on Monday, but we detected it on Monday. How long until we start to feel the impact of this?
Yeah. So we feel El Nino and La Nina's impact is the most during our midsummer season of November through February. We don't really feel the impact of those events very strongly during the spring, late autumn and winter months. It's only actually during the midsummer period that we feel its impact over Southern Africa. So that means El Nino and La Nina have its strongest impact over the summer rainfall regions. It has a marginal impact over what happens over the Southwestern Cape, but it actually has its strongest impact over the summer rainfall areas.
Professor, thank you so much. Professor Willem Landmans, Professor of Meteorology in the Department of Geography, Geoinformatics and Meteorology in the Faculty of Natural and Agricultural Sciences at the University of Pretoria. 17 minutes now to 9. Your mediated conversation continues here on SAFM. Dr. Sandile Ndlongwana is the Grain Chair of the African Farmers Association of South Africa. Dr. Ndlongwana, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning to you, SG, and how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you for your time. What impact has the hot, dry weather from this last El Nino season had on our grain harvests this season?
You know, SG, the impact of this El Nino-induced drought has really had dire consequences on the farmers. And as you may be aware that, the farmers were already reeling from the veld fires that really ravaged the infrastructure as well as the on-farm, equipment. So what has actually happened is that the crop estimate basically is actually, that was the initial estimation, was that both white and yellow maize basically will drop by 14.3 million tons. So in a nutshell, that would actually amount to 13% year on year. But obviously, it hasn't the consumption general of the maize would obviously be 12 million tons. So in a sense, we're still safe when it comes to the consumption. And South Africa will still remain a net exporter still, even though at lower volumes than the previous years. Now, crops such as your soybeans, for instance, have actually dropped, that's the initial estimates, by 23% year on year. And the sunflower down by 8%. Now, the rains that have actually come of late are actually very late, because the critical time really for crops, it's actually the last 2 weeks, if you like, of February, because that's the pollination stage of the crops. So even though now, for instance, we have had some rains, but they will actually not really make any difference, as it were.
I presume it takes some time for this to abate, right? The harvest that's in the ground now can't be saved because it's too badly damaged. Would that be right? Dr. Sandile Ndlongwana is the Grain Chair of the African Farmers Association of South Africa. I'm hoping that he'll be able to rejoin us and that we'll be able to continue with the conversation that we've been having around the impact of El Nino. You know what that beep means, right? When you're in the middle of a conversation and you have a beep like that. Dr. Ndlongwana, are you still with us? All right, we're going to just get through to him through other means. Sorry about this. Don't forget, we'll speak to Professor Guy Midgley on this issue in just a moment as well, just to get a deeper understanding of what all of this means for the climate. Yes, Dr. Ndlongwana, you're back on the radio. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yes, I think that probably is just the network challenges.
Yes. So the current harvest can't recover, is what I was going to ask. It doesn't recover from El Nino. We have to wait for the next planting season to really feel the benefit of the change. Is that right?
certainly, the current crop now cannot really be saved. We've got to wait for the other one. And obviously, this has not just affected only the crops, but it has also affected animals as well, because it is also the grazing land that has actually been damaged. And as you would know that, if the grazing land is affected, it means the animals will be affected. But there are farmers who would actually, when they plant, they would prepare forage so that they can actually feed farmers as well. Now, what we have actually seen is that the price of winners, that is the calves, has actually dropped as a result of that, because the prices of feed are actually very high as a result of the drought as well. And we've actually seen some of the farmers also beginning now to cull some of the animals because they can no longer feed them.
When grain is affected, as it has been, what happens to the prices? So you would expect if we produce less maize, then we will, the price goes up. But we're part of an international system, so while we may have produced less maize, other countries, because they might get more rain during an El Nino season, can produce more maize. So has it actually had a big impact on the price that we would pay?
Well, I think it would certainly affect the price, as I've indicated, because if, for instance, the feed is expensive, it means that the prices of also the maize will also increase. It will be good for, as I said, that we'll still remain as the net exporters, of the crop, because there's sufficient for internal consumption. So in a sense that those who will be exporting, they will still benefit because the prices will be high.
Is it possible to predict now what impact the end of El Nino has on the grain harvest in the future? So is it possible to make predictions based on what we know at this stage around the sort of weather models and the predictions? Is it possible to predict how big the harvest will be in, at the end of the next growing season, or is it too soon to do that?
Well, I would say that it would actually be too soon to do that, because even beginning of the season, we were actually a bit surprised because we knew that we're actually in the El Nino. But the rains were actually, good beginning of the season. But then the changes happened a little bit later, mid-season. So it would be very difficult to predict what would happen, even though we know that, El Nino, La Nino sometimes happen between, the periods of 3 to 5 years sometimes. But it would be very difficult to predict at this stage. But certainly the impact that, for instance, we have had now is likely to also affect even the winter season. In areas such as your Western Cape, which are, winter-producing areas, Free State, which also has been hard hit by this El Nino-induced drought, as it were. So we're not quite sure what the impact then would be, whether, for instance, farmers in areas like the Free State, they will decide possibly to pull back because of the impact now, or they may decide to plant more hectares to make up, for instance, for the loss that they may have incurred.
Dr. Sandile Ndlungwana, thank you very much indeed. Grain Chair of the African Farmers Association of South Africa. In a moment, the climate expert, Professor Guy Midgley with SAFM, 10 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just give yourself extra time to get out of, into, or through parts of Khayelitsha, the top end of Khayelitsha this morning. I beg your pardon, the top end of Soweto. I'm just tweeting about Khayelitsha, but let's focus on Soweto. So multiple roads closed, including New Canada Road between Pennyville and the Soweto Highway. The Soweto Highway effectively closed between the N1 Highway and Soweto Highway and the New Canada Road for through traffic. And the N17 that comes away from the circle is closed up towards the N1. So a lot of pressure having to divert there. Motorists appear to be going out through either meadowlands, causing some disruption, or down blocking roads through the Deep Cliff area. So plenty of extra time to negotiate Soweto routes this morning. The N3, the earlier problems up at Edenvale all cleared up, so that's good news. The N12 in from Boksburg and Benoni, still queuing down to a crash scene at the Jet Park Road exit, and there's now been a collision on the R24 coming in from the airport just before the N12 merge. That's all backed up through Galuli's. Durban, a crash on the N3 outbound between Pavilion Mall and the Paradise Valley M13 split, so quite heavy if you're leaving Durban. Queues from Spaghetti Junction. The breakdown on the N2 North at Gateway's been replaced by a crash. So net result is no change. Heavy backlogs from beyond Queen Nandi Drive all the way through to the Umhlanga exit. And Cape Town protesting in Khayelitsha earlier. The very latest is the Baden-Powell Drive has been reopened. There are some delays on Baden-Powell and the N2, and a couple of crash scenes in heavy mist on the N2 between Baden-Powell and Spine Road, still causing some delays along the N2 corridor passing Khayelitsha. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Five-time champions plan to capitalize on home ground advantage, while 11-time champs have a huge strategy to dominate the battle from the first whistle. This is the first leg of the Total Energies CAF Champions League semi-final. Experience the exhilaration of African football. TP Mazembe FC versus Al Ahly FC, live on SABC1 this Saturday, 20 April at 2:30 p.m. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
Weekday nights on S3 are about to get lit. BBC Primetime will give you access to a hand-picked selection of BBC Studios' award-winning dramas, documentaries and factual entertainment with titles such as Luther, Critical Cheaters, Top Gear, Live at the Apollo, Louis Theroux, Forbidden America and more. You simply don't want to miss out. Tune into S3 from the 1st of May from 9 p.m. until 11 p.m. to channel the best of British entertainment with BBC Primetime only on S3. Open up.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
Continue your mediated conversation around the end of El Nino. Professor Guy Mitchell is a climate change researcher and acting director at the School for Climate Studies at the University of Stellenbosch. Professor Mitchell, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
In a system where the climate is changing and as a result the weather changes too, are we expecting the impact of an El Nino system to become a lot more pronounced? So in other words, is this one of the systems that will lead to us having greater variability in our weather? Hotter and drier and wetter as well?
I think that's in general correct. We've said for more than a decade that climate change is a risk multiplier. So it sits on top of existing risks and makes them worse and more extreme. And one of the reasons is that the effects are not linear. They may go up exponentially with, for example, increasing temperatures. The potential for heat stress effects, particularly on people, increases exponentially. And we've seen a recent report for tropical Africa of a number of excess deaths related to extreme heat events across tropical African countries in the last month or so.
So El Nino doesn't contribute to a changing climate, but it does contribute to the amount of heat in the air. I mean, it's quite a complex thing to sort of get, but as I understand it, El Nino and La Nina, from what we've heard earlier, don't actually change the climate over the longer term. It's always a temporary phenomenon. Is that right?
Correct. It's an oscillation. That's a bit of a giveaway. It's the oscillation. So it's a system that swings from one state to another, occasionally pausing in a neutral state in between. I don't think that we can say X causes Y in this case, but it is a circular, self-reinforcing system that operates across the planet. And the way that we monitor it, as Willem said so eloquently, is by measuring the temperature in the Eastern Pacific. It doesn't mean that the Eastern Pacific drives everything. It is a driver, but it's also caused by everything. So it's a circular process that is driven by the natural frequency of climatic conditions that happen on the planet.
We're beginning to see strange things happening. So the flooding in the Gulf. I mean, in the United Arab Emirates, this is a part of the world where they get so little rain, they use desalination plants for drinking water. When you suddenly have floods in that part of the world, I mean, that is not normal.
No, and I think we've got this quaint notion that climate change is going to linearly change the climate. There's nothing from history that suggests that this is the case. that very often we get non-linear changes and new states emerging. For example, the polar vortex over the North Pole recently switched its direction. Quite an unusual situation. And we're now seeing the emergence of what are called atmospheric rivers, these large movements of water in the upper atmosphere that are causing big changes to rainfall around the country. We saw California hit by the impact of an atmospheric river. So areas of Los Angeles and the western U.S. hit by severe flooding. The Antarctic has even been affected by an atmospheric river condition in the last few months, and that's accelerated melting of ice sheets off the eastern Antarctic. So there are lots of these phenomena which are both emerging and which we're understanding better. Even ENSO, we've only started to understand that in the latter half of the last century, and a lot of that understanding was driven by one of our scientists, Professor George Philander, who emigrated to the US some years ago.
For most people living on the coast and in KwaZulu-Natal, you worry about flooding. For people in the interior of the country, so for example in Gauteng, we had a heat wave that really did last for 6 weeks. It was very long, very intense. Is that the kind of thing that people on the Highveld in South Africa would have to get used to over time? We would have long, intense heat waves that go on and on.
That's one of the implications. Yes, so a greater impact of the high pressure systems. We even saw an increased frequency of mass mortality of small bats and birds in the Kalahari region earlier this year because of excess heat waves that had gone on for longer than the natural environment has adapted to. These are clear signs that our natural systems are coming to the edge of their tolerance limits in some parts of the country and other parts of the world. And human limits, we're animals too, and our limits can also be exceeded, as we've seen in tropical Africa.
And this could happen, as you say, not in a linear fashion. It could happen suddenly very quickly.
That's correct. I take the example of wind impacts, for example. I was in conversation with some engineers at Stellenbosch yesterday. It's one of the benefits of being in the School for Climate Studies. I work across a wide array of topics. And I learned there that impacts of extreme wind rise exponentially, in other words, with the square of the wind speed. And we saw in the Western Cape last week these high wind events and a lot of structures being blown over. And it feels like a coincidence. Why did so many structures get blown over, walls and fences and things? And it's this effect of this exponential increase in the forces related to the increase in wind. And one then has to adjust the safety standards for building such structures. And Stellenbosch University is involved in providing those guidelines to SABS.
Professor Guy Midgley, thank you. A climate change researcher and acting director of the School for Climate Studies at the University of Stellenbosch. My thanks also to Dr. Sandile Ndlongwane, the chair of the Grain Chamber of the African Farmers Association of South Africa. And starting us off today, Professor Willem Landman, is a professor in meteorology at the University of Pretoria. Well, thank you for being with us this morning. We will see you tomorrow for the Friday edition of SAFM Sunrise. Kathy is next from Mdu, Stanza, Mpo and Melissa. Myself, look after yourself. You're with SAFM leading the conversation. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, Operation Tutula bemoans exclusion from the ballot, and scientists decry impact of climate change in the Sahel region. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. We'd start with some election-related news now. The Operation Tutula movement has accused the Electoral Court of bias in handling its case against the Electoral Commission. The movement has been excluded from appearing on the national ballot for failing to meet the deadline for the submission of the candidates list. The movement approached the court, which has reserved judgment. This after the movement blamed the commission for what it said was a technical glitch. Depending on the judgment, Operation Tutula could approach the ConCourt to seek leave to appeal. The movement Secretary General Zandile Tabula.
The IEC will have to postpone the election because they cannot print the ballot papers while our case is still in the Constitutional Court, because we tried, as for Operation Dudula specifically, we tried to get help from their side. They failed. Everything is there. All the proof is there that we tried to get help from them, but they still dismiss our case. So we're hoping that we're going to get justice in the Constitutional Court.
The Employment and Labour Minister, Thulas Nxesi, says the country's high unemployment rate has prompted his department to launch a program aimed at addressing the problem. He says under the program, poverty will be alleviated through training unemployed people and assisting distressed companies. Nxesi was speaking in Cape Town, where he launched the Western Cape Labour Activation Program.
Only substantial economic growth and development will rescue the country from the unacceptable high unemployment rate. But in the meantime, we also believe that the government working with all the stakeholders has a major role to play in mitigating unemployment and creating and preserving jobs.
Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi has described as historic Johannesburg's Power Utility City Power's official launch of its recommissioned open gas turbine in Fortsburg. The former John Ware substation, which is renamed after the late City of Johannesburg Executive Mayor Mpho Moerane, will add 50 megawatts of electricity into the grid. The launch of the substation forms part of the provincial government's plan to add 100 megawatts of electricity to the grid to mitigate the impact of rolling blackouts in Gauteng. Lesufi explains the importance of the turbine, which was switched on yesterday.
We are demonstrating to our opponents that 18 months ago, this municipality didn't have 50 megawatts. We are contributing 50 megawatts. That was not there 18 months ago. And that's the commitment that you want. Next month, we are bringing another 50 megawatts. That makes it 100. And by the next financial year, we are bringing another 100. We'll have almost 200 to 300 new megawatts that were not there. Something that we should have done many years ago.
The mountain fire in the Detroit Slough of Pass between Paarl and Worcester in the Boland region of the Western Cape has been brought under control. Fire spokesperson for the Cape Winelands District Municipality, Joanne Otto, says clearing operations and the monitoring of the site will continue.
Cape Winelands District Municipality's fire services and partners the Winelands FPA and Cape Nature can confirm that the fire in the Detroit Pass has been fully contained. Fire services report that the fire that started on Tuesday afternoon was contained at around 10 p.m. last night. Ground teams and a few fire vehicles and crew will stay on scene to continue with monitoring and mopping up operations throughout the day.
And finally, scientists say that the recent deadly heat wave in West Africa and the Sahel would not have taken place without the impact of climate change. The BBC's Matt McGrath has the details.
The Sahel, which is made up of 10 countries across the Sahara's southern rim and parts of West Africa, were hit by a very powerful heat wave in April that researchers now say wouldn't have happened without human-influenced climate change. In Mali, temperatures exceeding 48 degrees Celsius were thought likely to have played a part in higher than normal death rates. The study shows that daytime temperatures were up to 1.5 Celsius hotter due to the ongoing emissions of warming gases from the use of fossil fuels, deforestation and agriculture.
Recapping your top story, the Operation Dudula movement has accused the Electoral Court of bias in handling its case against the IEC. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 9:30.
Hashtag SAFM Talking Point. Real savings, real benefits. Here's what real clients say about OUTsurance.
My name is Alan. I'm 71 years of age and I live in Douglasdale. I'm paying 554 Rand a month for my 2022 Nissan Magnite.
Want a car insurance premium that'll blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote. It's quick, it's easy, and it could save you hundreds of rands every month. Here's Amy.
To anyone who has not reached out to OUTsurance, what are you doing? Reach out today.
Blow your mind, not your paycheck. SMS out to 30754 and see for yourself why OUTsurance was voted Best Car Insurer 2023 by the Star and Pretoria newsreaders. Here's Yusuf.
It just shows that OUTsurance is top of the tops when it comes to insurers.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
The Northwest Legislature's Portfolio Committee on Premier, Finance, Corporate Governance, Human Settlement and Traditional Affairs, led by Honorable Aaron Motswana, will embark on public hearings throughout the province on the Division of Revenue Bill B4 2024 and Northwest Appropriation Bill on the 19th April at Ngakamudil Mulema District in Tukrani Community Hall, at Dr. Kenneth Kaunda District in Banquet Hall Potchefstroom, at Dr. Ruth Somuti Mompati in Kismet Community Hall in Vryburg, at Bojanala District in Moretele Municipality Hall. All hearings start at 10.
For over 40 years, people around the world have been spinning and winning thanks to the Wheel of Fortune. Now it's your turn to take the prize as this legendary game show finally launches in South Africa weekdays 7:30 p.m. on S3, plus an omnibus Saturdays at 10:30 a.m. with rebroadcast on SABC2 9:30 a.m. Don't miss your chance to be part of history. Enter now on www.wheeloffortunesa.tv and let the wheel decide your fate. Channel your inner wordsmith on Wheel of Fortune on S3. Open up.
Amidst misinformation and disinformation, where can we find reliable news? Turn to radio, your trusted source for truthful updates. For over 3 decades, we've upheld integrity as a signatory to the BCCSA Broadcasting Code of Conduct. Count on us for news you can trust. Say no to fake news. Radio, keeping it real since day one. A message from the National Association of Broadcasters. Tune in, trust, and stay informed.
The Talking Point with Kathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
When I was held in solitary confinement, I was held in the death cell in Pretoria. First thing you do when you get into the cell is to with that at least you have a pin or something on you, so you can scratch the calendar on the wall. And that is how I kept sane, because you lose track of the time and the date. It had 3 doors. You had your door, and then the grill door, and then the door. And the sound of those keys, you would hear the first door opening, the sound of the clinging of those keys. You know, was part of the torture system. And each time, when you have just come to prison, each time they did that, it opened the cell. It hit you right into your heart. They would bring this porridge on top of your toilet bucket. They turn the bucket upside down, they put your food there, and the wardress stands at the door and kicks in the bucket. Couldn't even serve you with their hands, because that would lower their dignity. That is the extent to which they dehumanized you. I reached a point, I think a threshold, where the body could not take the pain anymore, and then I would faint. And when they threw a bucket of water to wake me up, it didn't matter that I was soaking wet. I got up, I was so refreshed, and I started fighting all over again.
Anti-apartheid activist and icon Winnie Madikizela Mandela. She's sharing there some of her experiences while in solitary confinement, and of course she spent 491 days, and she would later release a book, and this was about 8 years ago now, where she released the book 491 days. And I must tell you, if there are very few books that will move you the way that 491 days will, because it's just an explanation of her time in solitary confinement. I finished the book in a day, but it was also a terrible day because I cried not only the whole day while reading the book. I probably was just morbid for weeks afterwards because of just the cruelty of the system and what it is that this particular woman had to go through. But her story, I think, shared by so many others. So, and it's part of, as we continue with Freedom Month and reflecting then on the journey to 30 years of this country's democracy. So what did it take? You have people that are saying that 2024 is their 1994, but what did it really take for us as a country to get to 1994? You're listening to The Talking Point. I'm Kathy Mutlatlana, and I'm with you until midday. Coming up on the show today, we'll kick it off with the National Roundtable. It's your open line, and I'll be taking your calls on 086 000 2032 is the number to dial, 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. And you can dial in and send your WhatsApp voice notes on any matters of national importance that you want to bring up. Today is a Thursday, so the second hour of the show then we'll get straight into Municipal Watch, and the municipality that's under the spotlight today is the Matlosana local municipality in Klerksdorp, where we have seen the removal of the mayor, who was, encouraged to hand in his resignation following allegations of corruption. That was followed on by the chief financial officer, who's also been suspended for allegations of corruption too. But the difficulty now is that both those positions remain vacant, and residents of the municipality say it's only worsening the crisis there, the financial crisis there. So we'll be speaking with some of the officials, including the DA, SANCO in the province, and the EFF. The ANC, of course, who is the party that had effectively told its mayor in Matlosana to resign, while they have declined to come on. We've been waiting for the past week, really, for them to confirm somebody who will be able to be part of that conversation. But yeah, we still do not have a representative from the ANC. So we'll hear then from the members of the opposition and also the civic organization there. And then the final hour of the show, we're going to be looking at the US-South Africa bill, the 118th review that is likely to determine then the relationship between South Africa and the US over the next 5 years. Of course, we know that with everything else that has been happening in the world, and South Africa seemingly being seen to take a position, a very strong position with the global South, and the implications of that for the West and what it means for our relationship with the US. So it's put a lot more tension, I think, on some of these conversations that are taking place in the US about what the nature of our relationship with that country should be. So we'll then take a look at this review and what's really at stake for South Africa. We've got a team of researchers and panelists that are lined up that will talk us through why we should care about this review and what then South Africa should be on the lookout for. That will be in the final hour of the show. So that's what you can expect coming up on The Talking Point. I'll be taking your calls in a moment. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. About a month ago, we received a call from one of our listeners who is out in Grootes, and he called into the show and basically raised issues. In fact, it wasn't a month ago. This was towards the end of last year. I'd gotten my dates wrong. So in November last year, he called into the show and raised concerns about the killings that were taking place in Grootes and how there were assassinations that were happening, and that there was a sense of complete lawlessness in the community. And he was bemoaning this and saying that, well, people are actually having to flee their homes out in Grootes because of the high crime rate and the lack of action thereof. And I see yesterday that the police minister, Khayelitsha, has deployed a task team to Grootes. It's in the Umzinyathi municipality, and they are trying to make sure that law and order is restored, but also that they can really get a handle on the assassinations that are taking place there. I'd love to hear from our listeners who are from that area, because last year in November, we did get a commitment from the Minister's office that they would be looking very closely at what is happening in that area. So I see that there was a delegation of the police there yesterday. They've deployed a task team, but what I would want to know is what the community has to say about what has happened in the last couple of months, and whether there has been any positive signs of actually turning the tide against these criminals that were literally running rampant in that area. So if you're out in Grootes, please, I'd love to hear from you too around the issue of crime and assassinations that have been taking place there. All right, let me take a quick break. I'm back with your calls.
The cost of living crisis is real. Here's what one Outsurance client did about it.
I'm Amy. I'm 26 from Kenilworth. When I got my 2022 Ford EcoSport, the immediate thought was to phone Outsurance, and I pay only 819 Rand per month. No insurers were able to beat or match the premium that I'm currently paying.
Want a car insurance premium that will blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote, and to find out about included benefits like panic assistance that sends the nearest medical or armed response unit to you wherever you may be 24/7. Here's Yusuf.
45 years old from Teigedal, Western Cape. I pay 700 Rand for my Polo 1.6 2021 model. If you haven't called Outsurance yet, definitely get in touch.
Give it a go. SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
For the first time in 30 years, the ANC is set to lose its majority. Opposition parties have united as the multi-party charter for South Africa.
A strong democratic alliance with a proven track record
Can anchor a new government that serves the people.
But a new government that works is only possible if you vote for it. Let's unite and rescue South Africa. Vote DA.
This political party advertisement was paid for by the political party concerned. The views expressed in this advertisement are those of the political party and not those of the SABC.
Did you know? South Africans consume more water per person per day than the world average. We use approximately 237 litres of water per person per day, while the world average stands at 173 litres of water per person per day. To achieve water for all, each one of us needs to use water sparingly and more efficiently. We can do this by ensuring that we don't waste water. Take 2-minute showers, fix our dripping taps, and use buckets to wash our cars, amongst others. #SaveWater. Every drop counts. This message is brought to you by the Department of Water and Sanitation.
Join Smile Foundation for a movie night under the stars featuring Sing 2 on Saturday, 20th of April at Old Ed Sports Grounds. To book, visit smilefoundationsa.org. This is an SABC supported initiative.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
The illegal firearms are not a problem that is making South Africa being unruly. It is the illegal firearms that are coming from our borders that are porous. 1969, I think Big Border or whoever that was rallying for food allowed the black people to own their own firearms, and there was no problem from 1969 up to until 1996. I think the main problem is we are not having laws that are strict to make sure that those who found with illegal firearms are put into books. I mean, we must now make sure that we are not blaming the legal gun owners and those who are selling guns, because the police are also robbed, the army is also robbed. There was a container that was also missed in Durban. Thanks, Tagata.
Morning, Kathy and the team. It's Dee from Velcom. I concur with you about the clip and the book that you talk about from the clip. What it did to you, it did the same to me. I read it at the library a few years ago when I had hit rock bottom in my life. Much as it opened my eyes about her suffering and that of others, it also gave me new hope, because having read it, I asked myself, if she could pull herself together having experienced that, why don't I do the same? And I drew strength from that, psychologically, emotionally, mentally, and things are beginning to come together. Thanks.
Wow, Dee, thanks for sharing that WhatsApp voice note. And you're right on being able to draw strength. One certainly realizes just how strong an individual she was, emotionally, psychologically, to still be able to function after all that. Paul, you're out in Mangaung. You also want to talk about Mamwini. Good morning.
Good morning, Kitty. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Not so bad. You see, the speech of Winnie Mandela is very touching. And this kind of speech or this kind of a book was supposed to be implemented in syllabus for our children. But nevertheless, the NM is the one that gives us the history. And they tried by all means to cushion the bad part of it so that we can accommodate them. Can you believe that was this gentleman called Bismarck? Bismarck, on that chapter when it says Bismarck foreign policy was a sort of competition which country in Europe can conquer Africa. And Bismarck, he was thinking to conquer Africa as a province, I pardon myself, as a province of Yemen. Just think of Yemen and Africa. And then came the partition of Africa. In the same foreign policy, they divided countries as a district of Yemen. Can you believe that? And today, when you Google that Bismarck foreign policy, they question all the bad things that he was doing. And trying that now, Bismarck was trying to make sure that Africa can develop. KJ, I'm not talking nonsense. Just Google Bismarck foreign policy. But the books next door, next countries, if you were fortunate to go outside of the country to read it, those books, they say exactly as it is. But today, our children, they can't read that kind of history because they know that we won't be friends with the white people. Can I close my case?
Look, you know, Paul, I think that 30 years with a democratic government, right, there is a lot that we have had the opportunity to do. And so while you're right in that historically, there are things that have been written out of the history books in inverted commas, there is and there has been opportunity for a democratic government to change that. And there is an opportunity for also us, Paul, as individuals to change that.
Kitty, there is no government that has a strong leadership here in Africa. I'm talking Africa as a whole. Because everything we import from outside the world, we can't govern ourselves through our rules. We use the rules of Europe. The reason why, I don't know. I don't know why don't you call Nkate Isaac home. That guy is very, very, very educated in this history thing. Just to have him time and again every week to educate us.
Okay. All right.
Our children, they are lacking knowledge. Our children, what they know best, ask them which flavor is the best on Hubbly Bubbly. They will tell you. And then where today it's falling, where's the parade, they will tell you. Thank you, Kitty.
Eish, all right. All right, Paul. Paul out in Mangaung. And you're right about Ntate Khomo. He's absolutely brilliant and very insightful. We've had him on the show quite a few times, actually. Thabo, you're out in Davidton. Good morning.
Morning, Sis Katie. How are you?
Well, thank you, Thabo.
Very well, thanks. Sis Katie, I'm a child of democracy. I was born in the first election of South Africa. So now what I have noticed, we always, when I listen to the show, they talk about 30 years that the ANC has been in power. Now there is an African leader that says there is no European solution for African problems. So now, when we see us, the children of democracy, what has ANC and CODESA done all these years? What they have done is to inherit or adopt foreign laws that they want to govern Africa or Kemet or Azania with. So now, the problem is that all these years that we have adopted all these foreign policies and laws trying to restore what was destroyed in Africa, 30 years later, it turns out that all these things are not working, all these laws and all these policies. So our leaders, they are not organic, as in a point that when they decided to put all those laws for the public to follow, they didn't come and address and assess us that what do we want us to be promoted or to be what we use as a solution for us for our problems that we have here in South Africa. What they did, they imposed democracy on us. They imposed all the laws and regulations. Nobody that was going through the struggling time, nobody said we need democracy.
Okay, so Thabo, in your view, then, what is it that is needed? Because I hear you, you know, you're contesting and contending with what has happened historically, but I think it was the former CEO of the Mandela Foundation, Sello Hatang, who said you can't argue for a better past. So you, Thabo, as a child of democracy, what has happened historically has happened, but you say it's not working. So what is the alternative? What would you want to see?
What I want to see organic leaders that go to the people in the lower ground, in the level ground, the majority, and listen to their cries and devise a solution from what the people are crying about, because the rules that they are adopting and bringing to us as solutions, really they are not solutions. For example, they went abroad and they took investors that brought this thing that they just brought down now that is in the Electoral. Yes, Electoral. Electoral is not helping anyone from the ground level. Why don't they come to us and address us? What are we crying about?
Okay.
For example, now
right.
our tuck shops in our townships, they are selling us poisonous food, and we are eating those food on a daily. And the government knows about it. That our African brothers are selling us rotten things. They don't come and check on them. They don't have certificates, these people, to distribute food to us. Everything that we are getting in the townships on the ground level is poisonous. I don't know. Maybe they want to kill us all and replace us with our African brothers and their European friends.
Okay. All right, Thabo, we're going to have to leave it there. We're going to have to leave it there. It's time for the latest news.
Good morning, Kathy. In your headlines, cell phone data analyst Gideon Grootes is expected back in the High Court in Pretoria when the Senzo Meyiwa trial continues this morning. Yesterday, Grootes told the court that downloaded phone records showed that the accused were in contact. The Operation Tutula movement has accused the Electoral Court of bias in handling its case against the IEC. The movement has been excluded from appearing on the national ballot for failing to meet the deadline for the submission of the candidates list. And the European Union leaders meeting in Brussels have agreed to tighten sanctions on Iranian producers of drones and missiles. This comes in the wake of Iran's unprecedented attacks on Israel on Saturday night. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
All right, we continue the conversation on the National Roundtable. It is your